This edition of Green Rush Live is supported by Canna Business Resources, helping you grow with Canna Business funding. Check them out at cannabusinessresources.com. Hey, you want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information. Well, I don't know about you out there watching in internet land, but when it gets to be Friday, there's a sense of relief, I would think, in all of our lives. Some have more stressful lives than others. I'll put mine up against anybody's stress at this point. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Green Rush Live, our regularly scheduled business, cannabis talk show, or cannabis business talk show, depending on which way you listen. We are so excited about talking about this subject today because of what happened in Washington, D.C. yesterday. And if it sounds familiar, like a deja vu all over again, it's exactly almost to the week when Chuck Schumer introduced federal legalization framework for draft purposes, for feedback purposes. And it took him a year to basically re-release it after getting some feedback from the industry. Now, joining me as co-host today will be Josh Kincaid, he of the Talking Hedge, he from Washington State. Hello, Josh. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jimmy.
And as always, it's usually the third Friday of every month, but we skipped the first one just because we were on vacation. Morgan Fox from NORML joins us from Washington, D.C. And obviously, there's a buzz in Washington, D.C. that has nothing to do with the hearings from the last couple of days. It actually has to do from the cannabis industry, because there's hope on the horizon that perhaps something in a reform package will actually get to the floor to be debated by the U.S. Senate. Morgan Fox, thank you again for joining us. What's your reactions to what went on yesterday?
Well, it was great to finally see this legislation actually be officially introduced after waiting, a year from seeing the draft legislation. And it was also great to see that the engagement that Senate Majority Leadership has had with stakeholders across the political spectrum has actually made it into the bill in a lot of places. I think that this is kind of unique experience for us that not only do we have leadership promoting cannabis policy reform, but we actually also have them actively listening to what people are saying. Clearly there are still going to be some problems with this bill that we all have to dig into over the coming months, but overall, I'm pretty happy with it. Even though it probably doesn't have the votes to pass this year, at the very least, it's going to be able to facilitate really substantive conversations about cannabis policy reform, both comprehensive and incremental. And we've already got our first hearing set up in the Judiciary Subcommittee for Counterterrorism and Crime on Tuesday. So already this bill is having one of my desired effects.
There you go. You said that this bill has changed a little bit from the original draft. One of the things that stuck out on that original draft was an exorbitant federal tax. Please tell me that they've brought that down a little bit.
Not particularly, and that's definitely something that we're going to have to work on. Big businesses are going to pay starting at 10% and then moving up to 25% after 5 years. Small businesses are going to pay 5%, moving up to 12.5% after 5 years. And honestly, that's just too much. And, lawmakers need to realize that when you're dealing with an established, unregulated market competition, you need to set the tax rates as low as possible in order to help displace that market. And if you do that, then you will be able to realize much greater tax revenues in the long term in order to be able to fund all of the restorative justice programs that we absolutely want to fund that are included in this legislation.
There you go. Josh, you're someone who has looked at far more spreadsheets than I have. Does it seem that the federal government is doing everything they possibly can to kind of slow down the green rush in Washington, D.C. and make it as difficult as possible for this industry to survive?
This one seems really vague, where they want to have a lot of bureaucracy involved. There's at least 3 federal bureaus that are involved at minimum, right? And then they kind of throw in random stuff in there like, we're going to ban all additives in vapes, natural or otherwise. So there's a lot of different things coming out here. So it's obviously built and developed by lobbyists for their clients. And it's not really to kind of drive a path, in my opinion. So no, this is kind of just throwing a blanket out there, and I'm not really sure if it's going to solve anything, because it seems that they're building a lot without thinking it through, and how that's going to actually be executed is probably a nightmare.
I mean, I would actually kind of go at it in a little bit of the opposite direction, that this bill actually represents a lot of problems for the industry, and particularly larger businesses. So, I mean, I don't necessarily think that it is being tailored to the lobbyists. I think it's more being tailored to the lawmakers that are either misinformed or are just not knowledgeable enough about the actual needs of the industry, or of regulated cannabis systems, period. But that being said, they did take a lot of people's input into account. And, overall, I think that, this bill is clearly going to have to be tweaked a little bit. But, the fact remains that it doesn't have the votes to pass in the current Congress. So it does represent an excellent starting point for conversations that are much more substantive and much more farther reaching than we've ever had in the Senate. And so now we have the opportunity to actually have legislation to look at and to start debating some of the finer points of exactly how to end prohibition. And I think one of the good things that will come from this bill, I mean, my fingers crossed, that we will be able to pull some parts of this, or at least the legislation will be able to help us inform our discussions about potentially passing more incremental legislation like banking and expungement, and potentially access for small businesses to the SBA program. That will be a huge step forward. And while, clearly won't end prohibition, which is what we all want to happen, will get us farther in that direction than we could have had we not gotten the go-ahead to actually start talking about those issues with the introduction of this bill.
We've had your old pal Michael Correa on here a bunch of times, and he always referred to the safe banking as low-hanging fruit. It's part of this bill. Is that the one thing that you think the other side of the aisle will be willing to accept? And maybe that is the incremental step you're looking for?
Well, I think the GOP would support safe banking before almost any other sort of positive cannabis policy reforms. That being said, the Democrats want to see that be beefed up a little bit in order to help protect against predatory lending, and make sure that small businesses, particularly those represented by marginalized communities, are able to access the benefits that could come with having safe harbor for financial institutions to be able to work with cannabis companies. And so the language that's in CAOA kind of provides a blueprint for exactly what Democrats want to see when it comes to banking language. Some of that stuff might be a little bit too far for the GOP to get on board with, but I think that it does provide a pathway in terms of language that specifically protects against predatory discriminatory practices, and also provides guidance for the financial services industry to know exactly how to interact with the cannabis industry in a way that's not going to draw congressional ire.
Yeah. Josh, are you confident at all about this or not?
No, I was in banking. I just look at this launch of a 10-year pilot program for small business administration, and I never in my entire career saw one SBA loan go through. So I think that they've got a laundry list of catchphrases that sound good on paper, but like I was mentioning, the execution of this, I'm not. I just don't. I think it's going to be like walking through molasses. It's going to be really slow if it works at all. And being in Washington, one of the first states that did regulate cannabis, we pushed it through thinking like if there's something wrong, we'll just go back and change it. And things don't work out like that. Kind of like the Class C felony on maintaining and operating a marijuana lounge. The felony that they put on there was in 2016 or 2015, and it still is there. So there's like no room for talking about certain laws or overturning, these rules. So I would look at something like an equitable licensing grant program being something that they need, but how's it going to be executed? And we talk about offering these equity licenses, and it doesn't ever seem to come to fruition yet. It seems really slow. So if it does happen, that's great. But I think that there's a lot of things that are on the paper here, but like I mentioned, the execution of it, I'm not going to hold my breath.
Yeah, well, I mean, Washington State has had, it still hasn't been able to legalize home cultivation, and is just now getting around to having serious conversations about social equity and licensing. Some states have gone faster than that. Some states have gone way slower than that. But I think you're absolutely right. Once the law is written, it's very difficult to get changes in it. Sometimes it can be a bit of an uphill battle. So I think it's very important at the federal level that we get this right the first time, or at least as close as we can. And then if we need to go back and make changes, then we have the opportunity to do so. But they should be the smallest changes that we can possibly manage so that we can actually make them be a little bit more doable.
Is this creating a federal, you told me, I heard 3 different divisions at the federal level to oversee the industry, or are they going to piggyback off the alcohol and beverage and FDA and the DEA, the Department of Agriculture? Have they picked 3 that they like and that they are going to try and work with, or are they creating more bureaucracy at the federal level with this bill?
Yeah. So Treasury would be in charge of a lot of the taxation and licensing issues, but then most of the regulatory issues would be controlled by the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, the FDA, and the ATF. But and while this bill actually does create a lot of the structure for that beforehand, there would still be a lot of questions that need to be answered in terms of individual agency policy decisions and developments of those specific policies. That being said, it also creates additional departments within existing agencies to deal with things like the Opportunity Fund and the Cannabis Justice Department. So there would be additional bureaucracy involved there, but at the same time, I think that it's absolutely necessary in some cases to create that, because there are things that are specific about the cannabis industry and about cannabis policy generally that aren't necessarily immediately one-to-one transferable with other agencies' responsibilities, and that need to have experts placed in charge of it that have knowledge on the specific issue space, as opposed to just trying to shoehorn it into existing agency responsibilities.
Yeah, Gorski in our chat room brings up a great point, and it's something I hear often when I'm out in the trenches at different dispensaries or trade shows, that it almost seems like they want the small businesses to fail, and that kind of opens the door for the big MSOs who continue to just get bigger and bigger. And Josh, your comment about the SBA in general kind of freaks me out a little bit, because how are we ever going to grow, our economy without the power of small business? Because small business eventually could become big business if they're successful. But if there's so many roadblocks, there's almost like a drive to the end, the end and failure. And that concerns me. Morgan, I know that you're not in charge. You're not the cannabis czar, but if you were, what exactly would you like to, what is the framework? Is decriminalization and descheduling and the banking, those are the three biggest issues, aren't they?
Well, I mean, descheduling takes care of decriminalization
Right.
de facto. And obviously, like, we cannot move forward with a rational and sensible national cannabis policy without descheduling. Rescheduling is going to be a nightmare for the states if they wanted to get into compliance. I mean, they're out of compliance now, but if they wanted to get into compliance with like a Schedule 2 or a Schedule 3 setup, it would be a total disaster and would basically gut every single existing medical and adult use system. So, descheduling is really the ultimate goal, but there are all sorts of things that we need to consider along with that. And I mean, there are a lot of other issues just beyond that related to things like interstate commerce and exactly what that looks like. What does import export look like? Really top of mind for me is, what does the tax rate look like? Because the existing tax rate is just simply too high. Compared to the SRA or the MORE Act, we're looking at just a massive tax rate that at the end of this 5-year implementation period would be almost on par with where a lot of businesses are with 280E at this point. And that's not a good way to disrupt the unregulated market and bring in more tax revenue overall. So, aside from everything else that we're talking about this bill, we really need to look at the taxes involved, because that is going to be something that is going to be hobbling the industry from day one.
Didn't this happen in California recently? Didn't they have to change the tax code?
Yeah, they just reduced the taxes pretty heavily. I think that's not without precedent either. Colorado has done that in the past. I think several other states have done so as well, which is kind of mind blowing when you look at policy overall, because it's really hard to get politicians to drop the taxes on anything once they get used to that revenue. But I think that there is enough of a groundswell of support for decreasing taxes on the cannabis industry so that it can be more competitive with the existing unregulated market, that politicians are actually starting to listen and are starting to realize that this is a way to get more tax revenue in the long term.
Right. And it's not going away. I mean, there's 19 states now that have adult use programs. Some are vibrant and have been around for a long time, like Washington State and Colorado, and some are barely getting going, like New Jersey and New York. And I keep hearing good things about the New York State's issuing of licenses to the economic empowered applicants that are out there. And I find that to be a great development. New York is trying to do it right. Is that how you view what's going on in New York, Morgan?
It's definitely moving in the right direction. And I think it's one of the most forward-thinking programs that we've seen so far. We're going to have to see how it actually turns out. We've seen in cases like Illinois, where there were a lot of good intentions, and then the actual application and implementation did not really turn out the way that people wanted it to. And then things got bogged down in lawsuits. Meanwhile, the bigger businesses are further getting entrenched in and like solidifying their market share, while everybody else is fighting over the scraps. I think this isn't something that necessarily is an issue at the federal level, but it could become so when you start getting into interstate commerce, is that we need to get rid of license caps, period. License caps are the biggest problem for competitiveness in this industry.
Mhm.
So 3 isn't going to be enough per state. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, there should be zero license caps anywhere.
Free market.
Yeah, honestly, like social equity programs should be more based upon providing funding mechanisms and additional training and assistance to qualifying members, as opposed to having a specific set of licenses that are devoted to them, because there are a ton of problems with that already. But also, the people that are trying to get these licenses are competing against each other instead of competing against the larger market. if we get rid of license caps, you drop the barriers to entry significantly across the board and give everybody a chance to be successful.
Well, it sounds like, see, you convince me every time you come on the show. I'm easily convinced too, I might add. But I always think that there's a simple way to success here. And whenever a government gets involved, they just make it more and more complicated with more and more layers of government and bureaucracy and rules and regulations. And we all recognize that this is the most regulated industry that has launched and has been as successful in its first decade. But how, let me ask you a question, Morgan. When you go in, you talk to a member of the GOP, okay, who is adamant about legalizing, decriminalizing, opening the banks for cannabis. How do you break them down? How do you rationally try to explain to them why that makes that type of thinking is passé?
Well, it really depends on the individual and exactly where their, pressure points and priorities are. Some of them are more interested in states' rights. Some of them are more interested in free markets. Some of them are more interested in controlling the cannabis industry in such a way as to supposedly, minimize consumption, period, both adults and teens. And you just have to show them the science and the experiences of these other states and show them, like, look, the states that have either much more open licensing programs, have more competitive businesses, and have more small businesses that are successful. Every state that regulates cannabis has either flatline or decreased teen usage. It just really depends on exactly what their pressure points and concerns are. And luckily, we've got the science behind us.
And I always bring up the Colorado study now that shows that teen use in Colorado has gone down since legalization. So to me, there's no better set of results or research to share with those who always talk, well, what about the kids? And I keep saying the kids know more about this than the adults did 30, 40, 50 years ago. They still do. That being said, we need to educate the parents. We need to educate the small town politicians, and as well as the entire public, which, with no public service announcements and no anything that major media is doing. Let me ask you a question, Josh and Morgan. Did anybody see a story on national news about what happened yesterday, Morgan?
Yeah, a fair amount.
Okay.
But I mean, going back to your earlier point, some of the things that prohibitionists like to talk about a lot are, the teen use rate. And we saw that in the last year or so, Colorado teen use has dropped by something like 30%. I mean, it's ridiculous. But a lot of people like to cite increases in pediatric accidental ingestion ER admissions. And when, while that sounds scary, when you actually look at the numbers, you're talking about a couple hundred cases where there are 100,000 plus admissions in the United States for consumption or accidental consumption of cosmetics alone. All right. So we're talking about a very, very small number overall, but what looks like a big percentage uptick. And that's something that prohibitionists like to cite all the time. But what they don't talk about is the fact that, A, none of these kids are dying from accidental ingestion of cannabis. B, people are a lot more likely to take their kids to the emergency room when they know that they don't have to worry about getting arrested or getting custody removed because of that accidental ingestion. And C, when you really get right down to it, this is an issue of parental responsibility. And, a lot of the people that like to, hem and haw about this sort of stuff really completely ignore the fact that when it comes down to it, you're responsible for the safety of your own home.
Right. And educating your children. And it would help if you were educated to do that too.
And public education across the board is something that is useful. I mean, we saw that instituted in Colorado in terms of telling people start low, go slow when you're eating edibles, storing your edibles and other cannabis products out of reach of children. We've seen in state after state these public service educational programs that are having a real impact. And that, we've seen the same thing with tobacco and alcohol, that public education does way more than criminal penalties could ever do in terms of promoting responsible behavior.
Right. 100% on that, Morgan. We're all for it. Josh, you got any other things you want to add or ask Morgan before we break? It's okay. No pressure. No pressure.
There might be more synthetic urine on the market. If there's no federal drug testing, there's going to be some of these drug tests that are no longer needed. And then people can go out and buy their 10 ounces at the federal level. I think that's a great thing.
That's not something I see on the shelf of the stores that I shop in. Is that in Washington State?
Well, you got to go to like a head shop or whatever to get the fake pee, but yeah, it's out there. It works.
All right, fair enough. Morgan Fox, as always, a pleasure to talk with you, sir. Support NORML, support all those institutions out there that are in the trenches, making the difference in Washington, D.C., trying hard to do that. And coming up after this break, we've got two groups. I think Morgan's very familiar with one of them. The NCIA, Aaron Smith is coming on. He is the official, I think he's the CEO, and the executive director, Amber Littlejohn of MCBA, the Minorities Cannabis Business Association. So that's what's coming up next. Don't go away. It's 4:20. Kick back, enjoy, and we'll be back with more of Green Rush Live after this. Don't go away.
I'd forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you gonna do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just gonna lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. gonna sit down in my rented car. I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice.
Welcome back to the second half hour of Green Rush Live, our regularly scheduled live business of cannabis talk show here on Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and sometimes host of this show. Josh Kincaid from Washington State joins us. He, of course, hosts his own podcast. Hey, Josh, talk a little bit about the Talking Hedge for a little bit, and then we'll bring Aaron in. Give yourself a plug. Go ahead.
The Talking Hedge, your cannabis business podcast. You talk about some analytics, sales, trends, nerdy stuff that I like diving into when I'm not bogged down with the COVID. But, you know, we were talking on the earlier session about the heat and whatever, and I didn't mind being on the beaches of France, so I can't complain. But Talking Hedge talks about international events and what's happening locally at the ground level and how it affects businesses overall and the impacts that some laws might have, legalization, things of that nature.
There you go. And you can find it on YouTube. Am I right?
You can 40 plus platforms because you never know when you're going to get shut off.
And keep backing him up and then backing him up. Hey, let's bring on a guy that I have a lot of respect for and I've known almost since the very beginning of Pro Cannabis Media. His name is Aaron Smith. He's the CEO of the NCIA. He wears the brand on his sleeve, everybody, and it's right over his shoulder. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be here, Jimmy.
All right. So reaction to the Schumer bill, the CAOA bill that now has got 100 more pages to it after listening to the industry as someone who leads an industry association. Are you pleased with what has now been brought to the Senate floor?
Absolutely. You know, this is the most comprehensive piece of cannabis legislation that the Senate's ever seen. Or actually all of Congress. And, you know, it's not a perfect bill by any means, but I don't think there's such thing as a perfect bill. So we'll be working on some improvements, but overall, it's a great piece of legislation. And we look forward to building support and hopefully one day getting to 60 votes.
I don't mean to make fun of that, okay? But we all know how challenging it is with the political divide in Washington, D.C. And even some of the Republicans are coming over and the Democrats are coming over. It's still going to be a challenge. Let me ask you a question. How do you identify, do you go after 10 people, 5 people? Do you have like a target list? How do you decide where your efforts of lobbying are going to be?
Well, I mean, some of this is ideological. So, you know, you've got libertarians, you know, on the right, like Rand Paul, for example, who's going to support legalization. But then you have I think there's also a pragmatic approach that a lot of senators end up taking, like, say, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, where, they're Republicans, but they represent a state that has made marijuana legal. And so, the more of those that we have, the more, this will grow, the more support grows in Congress. And so we're not at 60 yet, and I don't think we will be this year, but it's getting close.
And you think even after the midterms that you're still going to be having to go after 60, right?
Well, yeah, well, no comment on the midterms, but yeah. So we'll, if it'll be a different world if Mitch McConnell is leading the Senate again. But Republicans are coming along. This is, if you believe in getting government out of your life and small government and all that, well, who's for not allowing states to move forward with cannabis policies?
I just want to make mention that you brought up Mitch McConnell's name before I did. Okay, just for the record here, because I still think he had no clue the Pandora's box he was opening with that farm bill in 2018. Am I right, guys? No idea, right? And has he learned anything from it? He thought he was helping out his tobacco farmers by giving them another cash crop. And it's kind of blown up in his face, and it shows, I might add.
Well, but it's just, I think I see policy as just an evolution, and that was one good step. And now there's a lot that needs to be done to regulate cannabinoids at the hemp and marijuana derived cannabinoids at the federal level. Whether it be in some cases like a food product, in other cases like a psychoactive drug. But I think we're going to get to a better place incrementally, and that was one incremental step forward. I got to give them that.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh, you have something for Aaron, or you can think of one, and I got another one if you want.
Yeah. I wanted to follow up on the 10th annual lobby days that either you got coming up or just did, and what some of the main goals were or takeaways from that.
It's September.
It's right? Coming up, but that's I appreciate that's a good softball question. I love talking about lobby days. It's one of our favorite events, I think, of our members. We haven't done it since 2019 for pandemic reasons. So we're really excited to come back to Washington, D.C. And essentially our members come into town. We set them up in groups, and they go and they meet with members of Congress all around Capitol Hill, members of Congress and their staffs, committee staff, and talk about the issues that are facing them. And it's, we have lobbyists, Michael Correa well, and Michelle and Maddie are lobbyists in D.C. But it's one thing to hear from them every day. It's another thing when you hear directly from the people that are affected by outdated cannabis policy. So, we're going to be talking a lot about KOA. We're going to be, trying to advance that bill. But in some ways, more importantly, we will be pushing really hard for the Safe Banking Act if it's not passed into law by then, which, by then we'll only have a few legislative days left in the year. So we really want to get that over the finish line this year.
Does the leverage of the midterms, it obviously enters into every political discussion, but does it help at this point to maybe get safe banking across the finish line first before those midterms happen? Is that at all a possibility?
Well, we're working hard, and I hope so. It doesn't make sense to not do it when it would make a lot of people happy in a lot of states that have issues around cash handling because of cannabis is legal at the state level, but not at the federal level. And I think it would obviously make our industry happy, which would be good for the coffers of these candidates. And so, I think that it should have been done a long time ago. But, there's also we've had a pandemic, we have a war in Ukraine, there's a lot of, inflation, a lot of issues that the Senate and the House have been facing. But safe banking has passed the House now 7 times in some form or another. And it's currently in the National Defense Authorization Act, which is a must-pass bill to keep the military funded. And it keeps getting stripped out on the Senate side, despite Democratic majority, and despite the fact that we know that if it got a vote, it would get 60 votes, be in the Senate. But for some reason, it just continues to hit a roadblock with Leader Schumer over there. So we've got, I think, 20 days left of the legislative calendar or something like that. So, let's get it done.
It at least now, I'm guessing those that are up for election during the midterms know that they better have a policy on how they feel about the movement of cannabis towards decriminalization. That has to help your cause, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I first started working on this issue like 17 years ago, almost 20 years ago, and usually when somebody like a senator or a member of Congress was asked about what they thought of marijuana, they just laughed. It was like not even an issue. And then, slowly but surely we've built this support to where you're absolutely right. Everybody has to come down on one side or the other. And most, it's very rare that you see a Republican standing up and giving a speech on the House floor against cannabis, like they used to do, all the time. You would have that, and now it's pretty, we haven't won everybody over, but it's our opposition has definitely softened up.
Is there a way to identify who some of these roadblocks or perhaps middle of the road Republican senators are that have tremendous control now based on the makeup of the Senate? Is there any way to identify which ones we should be talking to, what states? In other words, do you guys do like phone campaigns into those states to get their constituents to call and send emails out? I mean, is that an effort that happens on a regular basis? Is that a strategy, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, believe it or not, however cynical people get about politicians in this country, they do really listen to their constituents for the most part. And so number one, call wherever you happen to live and vote, call your two senators and your member of the House. And if they're already supportive on cannabis, still call them and thank them for their support. And you can go on our website, thecannabisindustry.org, and click on the congressional scorecard, which will show you every member of Congress and which bills they're sponsoring. So the Safe Banking Act, for example, has, I think, 40 or 42 co-sponsors in the Senate. And you can see who those senators are that sponsored it. If your senator has not, please call and ask that they sponsor it, especially if you live in a state where cannabis is legal in some form.
So the word sponsor is almost like a yes vote. Is that what I'm
It's a yes vote and then some. It's saying that they're putting their name on it. So if we need 60 votes, we have 40 or so co-sponsors. It wouldn't be too hard to get another. We were pretty sure we have another 20 that maybe aren't thrilled about enough to sponsor it, but they're going to vote for it because they know it's good policy and good politics too.
When we were debriefing on the bill with Morgan, he shared the amount of tax that still seems to be in the discussions. And again, they sounded exorbitant. Have you been able to identify those numbers? Are they at 25% for the biggies?
Up to 25%. So they have it on sort of a graduated scale. I will admit that it's much better than when they first put the bill out. It was just 25%. The discussion draft that came out last year, and I think every industry advocate in DC opposed to that. So it's better, but we're still going to work on reducing that, because we already have a problem in states that cannabis is overtaxed and people are still going to the underground market. Like California is the prime example in the industry. They're having to make some reforms there, and they are making some progress there. But the whole reason voters vote to legalize cannabis, believe it or not, is usually not because they like consuming it themselves. It's because they don't want a criminal market in their neighborhood for a substance that's safer than alcohol. So if we legalize and people are still going to a criminal market, we know that there's some policy incentives are not aligned properly. And I do fear a federal tax that would, on top of these onerous state taxes that already exist, would be quite detrimental to the industry, especially the small businesses that make up, Main Street cannabis.
Yeah. Josh, you got something?
I do. Yeah, I'm curious. I saw that you guys are hosting a Colorado industry social event. So one of the first markets to open up was Colorado, and they're not immune to a lot of the decrease in pricing. I'm wondering if that's putting a little bit of a stain on cannabis, because right now everyone's looking at some of the money and financing and opportunities, and all that revenue is creating FOMO. And I'm wondering if that's been eviscerated a little bit by the decline. Using Colorado as an example, they got a year-over-year sales growth of almost 20% since August of 2021. We've seen consistent month over month decrease in purchasing. And, some of that was supposed to be attributed towards people going back to work or going out and enjoying things. But a lot of it is inflationary pressure.
Yeah.
And that's putting a rather odd or unique situation on cannabis where there's deflationary results and there's the pricing pressure is coming down. People are spending less. And so is that therefore putting pressure on lobbyists or members of Congress who would have otherwise would enjoy a lot of the tax revenue? Is that luster being worn off in a sense?
I think it's our job actually to, educate lawmakers that, this isn't the big gold rush that the media sometimes portrays cannabis, and that, we're not an ATM machine for tax revenue. And Colorado, you're absolutely right. We're seeing declines in Colorado, but elsewhere too, declines in sales. I think probably everywhere.
Right.
And I think it is inflationary pressure primarily. But you also have the bounce back from COVID, where people were consuming at higher rates when they were in lockdown. And then you have another factor that I think the state needs to address is that in Colorado and many other states, you have hemp-derived cannabinoids that are psychoactive, Delta-8, THC, and others that you can buy over the counter at a head shop or a gas station, completely unregulated. Could be, not even age restricted in most states yet. And that's so we have a highly regulated, highly taxed industry competing with that. And that's something I know the state's working on here in Colorado. But I think there's sort of a confluence of a lot of reasons. But it does, we have to be cautious when we're the only industry out there offering to be taxed, saying, please tax us. Because we at the federal level, because we are tired of federal prohibition, and 280E is another issue that we can get into, the federal taxes. But at the same time, we can't be overtaxed or sales plummet and they all go to the criminal market, and that's where no taxes are being paid over there.
Do they still understand that there is a very vibrant legacy market out there that competes with the law-abiding legal investors in this space? I mean, do our elected officials understand that?
To varying degrees, yeah. This is the number of people consuming cannabis hasn't gone up that much in recent years. It's been pretty stable for decades, and people are used to getting it on the from their friends or on the streets or whatever. And as I really truly believe that the vast majority of consumers would much prefer to walk into a store and have cannabis products of a wide variety of options, knowing that they're tested and labeled with their the potency and everything like that, than getting it from a friend. But also, especially when you're looking at 9% inflation, it's the bottom line, and a lot of times it's it's cheaper to go somewhere where you're not paying the taxes. So I think this has to be, while we started this industry saying please tax us, and now it's kind of back off a bit because it's not working if you overtax like they have in states like California.
Yeah, and again, you could tax yourself out of an industry if it's so debilitating, if it's such a handcuff on these dispensaries that have the adult use licenses. I mean, I know there are plenty of people out there that are making lots of money in this space, but there's also a lot of people struggling. I think I saw 43% of cannabis companies are profitable at this point or have made money. And that means that 57%, Josh, you're my math guy. Did I do it right? 57, 43, 57? No.
You can't use my brain right now, Jimmy. I got the COVID. It's not working.
I think it is 53%. Means they're not, more than half are not making money in the business. And they've done everything right. And they've complied. They've got their licenses. They've opened up. And they just can't get it done. And, I hear the frustration. I was at an opening today down in Attleboro, Massachusetts, which is just over the border from Rhode Island in Massachusetts. They have 2 dispensaries within about 100 yards of each other. And it's buried in an industrial park. Now, anybody who understands the rollout of these things, that's not a surprise. Okay. We understand that's where a lot of the town officials want to put the cannabis dispensaries out of town. You have to drive to it, but putting them in the same neighborhood. I mean, how many liquor stores are across the street from each other is kind of where I'm going with that. Aaron, what's your feeling about how towns in these legal states are governing and placing these licensed facilities into these industrial parks?
Yeah, I mean, it makes no sense because, this is a retail, it's a retail facility like and unlike a liquor store, a child can't even walk into the dispensary. So it's extremely secure. And when you see, we've seen a patchwork of, cities handling things very differently. Here in Denver, where I live, dispensaries are pretty much, everywhere in the retail, commercial districts, including on the, very highly trafficked 16th Street Mall downtown. And it's working great. And, all of the research shows that crime actually decreases in the vicinity of a dispensary when a dispensary is built or is established in a location. And I think that's because, these are highly regulated businesses that have, highly secure cameras all over them. The owners and the management of these facilities have a lot on the line. So they're really going to look out and make sure that there's no crime around them because they don't want to lose their license. So it's, by every measure, it makes good sense to have dispensaries in the approximate places you would put a liquor store. And I think that that's going to be the trend as, we see the, first there these states or localities are a little timid and they push them into the industrial areas, or worse yet, just ban them. But then you start seeing, okay, well, the neighboring places aren't doing that, and they're actually doing better and generating more tax revenue for the jurisdiction. And those kind of ordinances can improve over time.
I just learned something, and for whatever reason, I never thought about this. So young kids can walk into a liquor store, they just can't buy anything, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I mean, as far as at least in the states I've lived in, I mean, I haven't actually researched all 50 states but you could walk into you go to a grocery store and there's liquor on the counter or on the shelves in many states, depending. So, I think maybe we're in Massachusetts, it might be a little different. I remember being out there and it was pretty secure.
It's always different in Massachusetts. It's always different in the Northeast. We want to stand out.
Now, similarly, I mean, I don't know if this is, I had heard that that New Hampshire was paying off, the local governments across the border to keep these counties dry so that people were coming in and paying taxes over there. I remember hearing that years ago. I think the same sort of thing could end up happening with cannabis if ordinances aren't put in place to make it easy and accessible for consumers to obtain it.
Right. There is no love lost on the border between New Hampshire and Massachusetts. It's always been a bit of a challenge. I have a dear friend who is a elected official in the House at New Hampshire, and he has given me such an education about how state government works or how it tries to work. And he is on the cannabis policy committees of New Hampshire, and they just continue to make it as difficult as possible to move forward beyond the minuscule medical program that they do have in that state. Aaron, I want to let you talk a little bit more about the lobby days. Is that open to anybody? How does that work?
It's only open to members. So, anybody who's a member, and members of NCIA are corporations or businesses. So, if your business is a member, all of the employees are also members. So, we have some folks that bring their whole team out, and then others, maybe just the CEO will be there. And it's businesses from across the country. You can go on our website, thecannabisindustry.org/lobby days, and find out more information, but it's September 13th and 14th. And we usually open it up with a kind of an informal happy hour as people fly into town. And then the next day will be 9 to 5 meetings. And each group does 7 or 8 meetings a day, probably, depending on logistics. And then we'll close it out with a reception with some of our top allies in Congress and have a little fun at the end. And then everybody goes home and feels really enriched. And I think it's a good, it's obviously good in that it's helpful for educating members of Congress to hear from the industries. Many of them don't. But it's also great for our members because I think they get a deeper appreciation of what we're doing and what we're facing every day.
Oh, yes.
And it's also just it's a great overall experience. You connect with each other. Your work. It's not like an event we go to in the evening and you have a couple drinks and go home. It's you're working with a group of other industry contemporaries for a whole day of meetings, and people make best friends at lobby days. So definitely want to come back with a bang, and hope everybody looks at registering.
Yeah, and I'll give a personal plug. I got to go to the last one. I really enjoyed it. I loved doing my official stand-up outside the Capitol, but I learned a very valuable lesson from the Capitol Police. Did you know that if you are a videographer and you are using a tripod, you must get permission from the Capitol Police to actually put the tripod out in public on the stairs anywhere near that area? And I learned that the hard way, but the guy was really nice to me. And I immediately took it down. And I said, okay, I'll just put it right here on this table and, manipulate the lens a little bit. And, you do the interview. But it was a valuable lesson for yours truly, and someone who did enjoy. And I also got to see you work, Aaron. Okay. I got to see you walking from the Capitol back to the office building, and you were working. I don't know who you were with, but you were working somebody there, because I knew you were deep in conversation with them. Is that not how it is done?
Yeah, it's personally my favorite project or event that we do, or experience, I guess. It's a series of events. And it's good. I don't get to do lobbying very much anymore in my capacity as the CEO, but that's kind of where I started as an advocate doing this. So it's great for me to be able to have 1 or 2 days of lobbying meetings one-on-one. And I think it's good as a citizen of the United States, that's really one of your fundamental rights, is the ability to redress the government. And it's been unfortunate that under COVID, the offices have been closed. They actually are still under different sort of regulations. So the meetings will be set up in advance, and the staffer has to come down and escort the group to the meeting. For whatever reason, but I'm really glad that we're going to be able to come back.
Yeah, just stay away from President Biden, because he's got it now, and then you'll have to put yourself in quarantine. And I give Josh a lot of credit. I mean, he came down with it over a week ago, and I said, are you well enough to join me? And he said yes. So, Josh, any last questions for Aaron?
No, I'm curious if an SRO is the solution, if having a self-regulatory organization is the way to go, in a similar way that the banking industry has done it. I don't know if you've got a solution or not, if you think that's the way to go.
Yeah, I think that is the direction the industry should go in. I think what's been a challenge for that, though, is that the states are so ahead in and every state is regulating the industry differently, which is challenging for multi-state operators, obviously. But I think it's challenging to start an SRO, and we've seen some come and go in the space, because it's hard to get the industry on board with self-regulation when they're already facing heavy, probably over-regulation at the state level. But I know there was the National Association of Cannabis Businesses just closed their doors, and they were sort of doing that. But I think it's the future ultimately, but I think it's hard to do with an industry that's still illegal under federal law. So I think that's the number one. In terms of getting to normalcy, we need to end federal prohibition. And the next week, the Senate Judiciary Committee will be holding a hearing on Wednesday. I'm sure they'll be talking a lot about the KOA, the Schumer Booker Wyden bill, and also just general, the issues and concerns and problems around cannabis prohibition. So really looking forward to seeing that, and then of course advancing this legislation through the Senate.
Optimistic that something will happen between now and the midterms, or are we waiting till next year like we used to?
I'm remaining cautiously optimistic about safe banking. Sometimes it seems like Congress does nothing, but then they can do a lot real fast when they need to. So I'm remaining cautiously optimistic. We're working hard, thanks to our members that allow us to, have boots on the ground in DC every day, and let's get it done.
All right, man. Hey, Aaron Smith, I really appreciate you coming on a Friday afternoon. I know it's the end of the week and it's been a very eventful week down there. Even though I know you're in Denver, it was Washington, D.C., you're never far away. Thank you so much. And you are welcome, as we talked before, anytime on this program. I've always enjoyed your company.
Great. Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to come back on the other side, and Josh and I are going to do a tap dance for a couple of minutes before Thomas Howard comes in. Don't go away. We'll be back with more after this. Hi, everyone. I'm PCM founder Jimmy Young, and you're probably wondering, what am I doing on a growing show? After all, I'm a convicted plant killer. That's why I surround myself with these beautiful plastic babies. But now I have found the secret to all those people out there who just don't want to deal with growing a plant indoors or outdoors. You just don't have enough confidence. Hey, check out greengoddesssupply.com. That's where you'll find the armoire system. Basically, it's growing for dummies like me. Check it out. The Armoire at greengoddesssupply.com. Hey, you want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information. Welcome back to the final half hour. Believe it or not, we're going to get a little early onto our weekend here at Green Rush Live. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. I'm a host of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young, one of our regularly scheduled podcasts that we now stream different shows all day long on our live stream on Roku and Apple. So on Mondays, we have the In the Weeds Monday binge. Tuesdays are the American Cannabis Report with Christopher Smith binge. Wednesday is the Calling All Growers and also the Dr. Mary Show. And I believe we also have Jazz Cabbage Cafe in there and Infuse, some of the other independent producers who share their work with us. On Thursdays, it's all about We Talk News because that's when we put the show together. Fridays is Green Rush Live, obviously. And yes, we go live on top of our live stream. Saturdays, we turn it over to the sports guy, Dave Briggs, who is also anchoring Yahoo Business in the afternoon now. And he interviews all these outstanding former professional athletes that have been, many of them inducted in the Hall of Fames, whether that's the NBA Hall of Fame or the NHL Hall of Fame or the NFL Hall of Fame. It's the Conversation with Dave Briggs and Amani Toomer on Saturdays. And on Sundays, we've gone into the vault that was Cannabis Chat, which was Josh, you'll like this because you do a lot of, you do a lot of content in Washington. How many days a week do you do your thing, the Talking Hedge?
In the summer, only 3, and then normally 5 days a week.
Yeah, there you go. So and how long is the Talking Hedge?
Anywhere from 7 minutes to an hour, just depends on the topic.
Gotcha. So idiot me, being the old school TV radio dude, okay, I said, you know what? Let's figure out if we can go live on Twitch. We're going to do 3 2-hour talk shows live Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in the fall of 2020, which was, of course, the not the peak of the pandemic, but was the going into the winter of the pandemic, if you will. And I was absolutely exhausted, but we had such great interviews. We're going to release a lot of those interviews now on Sundays on our live stream. And of course, we also are moving towards a new website where you'll be able to watch all this stuff on demand as well as our live stream. So that's my shameless plug for the company here. Very proud of what we've built. Our new show now has contributors from all over the country, coast to coast, and we are getting a Canadian reporter. We are resurrecting our European reporter, and we are shopping for an Israeli reporter, which I think would be really cool to call in a 90-second report. And if you happen to be out there, please contact me at jimmy@procannabismedia.com. And of course, we'll be happy to chit chat with you. One of the things that we don't do a lot of is go into the chat room and actually chit chat with some of the people, because it's tough for me to multitask at this. But there's a guy named Gorski who's been very active. He and Yogi are talking, and I see a guy named Jeff here. And it says here, is there a report of the revenue stream in each state because of application fees? Think of all the people that didn't even get a license, but had to pay a bunch of money up front just to fail. I thought that was an interesting point. Josh, what's happening in Washington State right now? Are they still giving out licenses there?
No, there's been a moratorium on that for a long time. I know of somebody who couldn't even give it away. He just basically had to give it back to the state and say, here, take it back. No one wanted to buy it for $1 because of where he was at. He was going to be in the middle of nowhere. Versus other people I know that could sell it for $150,000, per location. And that's still not a lot when you hear about 20 million moving at one place in Arizona, for example, an unlimited license state. But when you have 1,750 different SKUs running around and you can have 6 locations and as many stores as there are, doesn't really draw a lot of the same kind of investor demand that you see in Arizona or New York. But in terms of the fees, I was under the impression that the fees would be given back to you if you didn't get your license. If you did, then those fees would be put towards the cost. So there wasn't actually a real application fee. But I don't doubt it that there are some states out there that just did it.
Non-refundable. Yeah, non-refundable. Yeah.
You see it all the time in housing. If you're going to rent a house, you got to make an application fee, and it gets more and more and more. And they probably don't, and they just leave these listings open long enough to take in a ton of dough. So it's no different in the cannabis industry. I have no doubt that people are taking money for these application fees with no intention of ever giving it out. The airline industry, just to kind of make a connection there, the airline industry continuously is booking flights they know they don't have room for, and they're doing it anyways to take your money. So this isn't anything new.
Is that what they call free market and capitalism? Is that the idea here, is to make the money any which way you can out there and screw your consumer if you have to?
Yeah, Pete Buttigieg is the regulator for the FCC. We have state regulators for cannabis, and yet nothing gets done. Nothing ever happens. This small guy gets made. He's the excuse, whatever, and they put it the penalties on them. But then the bigger players walk away because they're literally too expensive. It's like the IRS doesn't go after rich people; it's too expensive. So they literally go after people that are small and can't afford it and just pay up. It's the same concept.
Yeah, and the rich get richer, and the little guy gets killed. Basically, is what you're saying here. Are we going to see? I'm trying to get to the point where I'm more comfortable with the fact that we've got a vibrant retail marketplace for legal cannabis. And how are we going to find out what the threshold is where, I think there's over 230 dispensaries now open in Massachusetts alone. I'm not sure if that's too many, but I do know in some of these towns have, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, all in the same area. It's kind of strange. Are we ever going to have a salary cap or a dispensary cap on states? And is that something you'd like to see the federal government actually put a cap on? I don't think you do, by the way, but I'm going to get your opinion on it anyway.
No, Morgan was talking about not having caps, and I think that's great because then it would open up that competition so that you don't have places like Arizona and New York with limited licenses creating these multi-million-dollar roadblocks or entry points when that's way too expensive. If you look at year-over-year sales growth for Massachusetts, it was 48% at the beginning of the year in January, and now it's 7.7% year-over-year growth rate. So it's gone down significantly. When you look at same store sales trends in the same area, Massachusetts, it's flat. It's like -1%. The difference, I think, is the lack of same store sales, which is new people opening up, like you said, creating more competition. So initially they may have 1 store, and then they were allowed to have 3, and then the rules increased it. Now they can have 6, or maybe they're crossing state lines when that state opens up, and that's adding more competition, taking revenue away locally and adding local competition. So even though the year-over-year sales growth is significantly lower, those same store sales aren't really moving at all, meaning that people are just buying it from other locations. That's right. What I'm inferring from that data. But it's getting bloated regardless. You can't have as many as there are, but it has to come to some inflection point in order for that to break and normalize.
Yep. And so today I took a drive down to Attleboro, Massachusetts, which again is just over the border from Rhode Island to Massachusetts, to visit that area. And I got a chance to witness the grand opening of Zahara. That is a new dispensary in Attleboro. And as you can see now, this is awesome. I get to do a voiceover. There is the grand opening banner. And, 100 yards away is another dispensary. But as you can see, the vendors were all set up. I saw Coastal Cannabis there with their wares. I think I saw Fernway there as well. There's our pal Armoire with Eric Robichaud with his stand-up sign inside the dispensary. This is inside Zahara. I took some video of that happening as well. There actually was a woman teaching people how to roll a joint in the dispensary, which I thought was a nice added addition because after all, it is all about education and educating the public. But you could see it was a pretty active thing. There's our pals from Coastal Cannabis with their stuff, their edibles. A lot of these dispensaries have a lot of the same products in it. And I wonder how and why you would go to one dispensary over another. There's all sorts of things going on now with rewards programs and what have you. There was a lot of traffic down there in Attleboro. As you can see outside this huge facility up there on the hill is Zahara, and there was room for musicians. There was a tent for officials there as well. And of course, we were all there for a ribbon cutting ceremony. Now, I learned something about ribbon cuttings. I was at Air Wellnesses on Boylston Street. There's the ribbon. So they gave him the scissors, right? This is John Connor. He's one of the principals. He's ready to cut it, right? He's got all his elected officials around them. And guess what? They never cut the damn ribbon because they didn't want to look. They want to use it again. Now I'm like, wait a second. I would have brought my own ribbon for this. It never got cut. It finally got applause and everything. So after the ribbon cutting, of course, I chatted with John Connor and with his partner, Ed Silva, about how they felt about finally getting to the starting line, finally opening up their dispensary. And here's that little conversation I had with John and with Ed. You're at opening day. Did you ever think this day was going to come?
We didn't. But well, I shouldn't say that. we did know it was going to come. It's just a lot of hard work from a lot of different people that have to put the time and effort in to get it to happen. But the town's been great, and we've got it through.
How gratifying is it for you to finally see the day where you open?
Oh, it's been great. And even today to see all the turnout with the folks that support us, and puts a smile on the employee's face, puts a smile on our face. We couldn't be more thrilled.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that in Massachusetts now there's well over 230 dispensaries. There's actually, and by the way, they put a lot of these dispensaries in industrial parks right where you guys are here in Attleboro. And sure enough, they put you across the street from another dispensary. Is there a spirit of collaboration or competition going on?
That's a really good question. Right now, it feels like a little bit of competition from one side. We'd like more collaboration because I think the collaboration would be go a long way, and just let the folks go wherever they feel most comfortable shopping.
Let the product decide.
Let the product decide. That's exactly right. It really comes down to product pricing. Everybody has the same product. Everybody has the same pricing, and really it comes down to your experience when you walk in. Our culture we're trying to set up throughout the whole thing. And when people leave, they got a smile on their face. And that stigma you're talking about, we see a lot of the soccer mom and pops coming in and the hockey dads and moms. And they're coming in, and if they feel comfortable in your facility, they're going to come back. And that's what we really want, is to focus on those folks as well.
All right. Well, I want to wish the Zahara Group a great opportunity. Have a great year. Best of luck. It was fun to come down there and see and meet some of the principals. They're very excited about their facility. They should be. And there's plenty of room outside that facility. They had food trucks there. And, one of the things I did talk with Ed about, Josh, and I told you about it, is in the industry, is there a spirit, an overall spirit of collaboration, or now, because you've got 230 odd retail dispensaries in Massachusetts, is it becoming more competitive? And what's it like, first of all, in Washington State? I mean, you told me there, they've put a limit on the dispensaries, but there's a couple in the same neighborhood, you said, right?
There's a lot in the same neighborhood, depending on where you go. In North Seattle, there's a bundle. You could hit up 20 different ones in 5 minutes. In downtown Seattle, you can hit up 15 in a matter of just like 5 minutes. So because of the limitations of schools and churches and the where they're not allowed to go, it really kind of forces a lot of them to go into the same area. And so there is a lot of competition. And then when you couple that with the fact that they're not vertically integrated, meaning the retailers are separate from the producers and processors, what that does is add a lot more competition. So, where you're at, you only have 321 SKUs. Whereas you walk into a shop in Washington and you're going to see 1,750 SKUs.
Wow.
So that retailer doesn't really care about the user experience, and they don't have control over the branding. They're going to put as many brands from as many companies in there as they can, because similar to like some restaurant that has a 40-page menu, they're like, we're just going to offer you the world and you can figure it out. Whatever. If you got a question, let us know. So it's really hard. I think you'll see a lot more cooperation from a co-op standpoint at the grow level. You got that farmer bro kind of mentality, whereas the retailers, they don't care. Like there's retailers that are absolutely despised in this industry and they don't care at all about what other people think. So it's incredibly competitive.
So I just checked the chat room, and I said this, that it looks like everybody has the same stuff. It doesn't mean that everybody has the same stuff. It just looks like a lot of the best vendors of the best products are in these stores open for business for retail. Is this more typical of every retail operation? I mean, again, I never have spent any time in retail sales ever. So I have absolutely no clue, if someone put me in charge of a dispensary, how I would run my retail operation. So I guess, are there 17 SKUs? That's a lot. You've got quite a variety, I guess, right?
Yeah, almost 2,000 SKUs is a lot. I've done pot shop crawl. I do 20 stores on 420 in Washington every year. And that gives me an idea of what's going to happen 2 years later. Typically that 420 sales was the everyday low price 2 years later. Since the pandemic, though, there's been so many discounts just to get people off their couch. They got to do 30%. So every Friday and Tuesday, 30% off. And now nobody cares about 420. It's just a longer line that they don't really need to wait for. We don't have delivery, so you still got to like go there. You're not going to go there on a 420, for example. So the layouts.
There's 2 420s in every day, right? There's one in AM, one in PM. I'm just saying.
But only the big one in April. So
Right.
I would go to a place that's going to have a better user experience. And the places I've been to, the pot shop crawls in Denver, San Francisco, Oregon, British Columbia. I'll be doing one in Chicago and New York and New Jersey coming up in September. And I've seen different things. That layout that you just showed in that previous clip is something I would see in like the Las Vegas smaller stores where it's more boutique and they want to offer just the right amount of the 7 categories. You have flower, vape, pre-rolls, edibles, beverages, whatever. Everything is there, and they have just enough so you don't get overwhelmed, versus like the MedMen where you might go in there and you're like, whoa, I don't need, that's more of a showcase or your own experience. So I think the branding is really kind of what draws people in. And from the sales, it looks like the big MedMen with the more options and the more show and wow factor is really what's bringing people in, until some of those smaller boutiques can have enough advertising money to get people to know that maybe they got the better stuff. I don't know, but they're gonna have to figure that out.
Well, I will. It does seem like there is a distinction here in Massachusetts between the craft grow quality and the MSO grown quality, even though some of the MSO stuff, and again, let's not blanket it. I'm sure I'm going to get ripped in the chat room for this. I don't want to rip the MSOs either, because I still think they're a necessary presence in a new industry. That being said, I know I'm going to get crap for that. I'm waiting on the chat room for that to blow up. But I just wonder about the future. I mean, some of the people I hear in dispensaries are saying it's a race to the bottom. That concerns me. It concerns me that there's so many regulations, so many taxes, so many barriers to entry, and then you finally get opened and you have to actually sell product to make money and pay off what you've invested to get any return on your investment. I don't know how big will this market that exists today ever get to the point where it grows even more. I'm hearing that the 50+ market in the United States is the fastest growing demographic that is pro cannabis, whereas the existing one that is 21 to 35-year-olds is consumed in the culture. Where do you think the future goes for this? And of course, let's assume that something positive gets done at the federal level.
Yeah, you look at white women 50 and over, they're the number one demographic for pre-rolls. They just want something you grab and go. They don't want the inconvenience or the mechanisms or anything. They just want the convenience and the low item price. So I think we can look at other industries to kind of see where we're going to head to. I think looking at Budweiser and Tilray is one of the same. People are going to want something that doesn't have a lot of flavor, really inexpensive, highly accessible, that's going to just do what they want them to do repeatedly. It's going to be 4% alcohol by volume is not a lot. Tilray's not producing really anything anybody wants. And so that's perfect kind of big cannabis that you said is an integral part to the system, allowing other brands, let's stick with the BC Canada area and say like a brand like Hank's that is actually producing high quality hash and innovative products like a hash joint. That's going to be something that gravitates those connoisseurs that are actually looking for top shelf items. It's also going to keep the pricing and a good kind of balance between producing at a high level with low quality, and then producing things that people actually want to consume. And so you need both the Tilrays and the Hanks in order to kind of survive. But in the end, I think just like coffee, where you had all of these stores that didn't need to be there, Tully's. Remember how many Tully's were around? Maybe you didn't see them. I don't know. They were everywhere trying to copy Starbucks. And then they just, they got some actors, from TV and stuff to jump on the bandwagon, and it flopped. But then with the ashes, rose bikini baristas. We've got a ton of them out on the West Coast where they just serve coffee and it's niche and it's weird. And that's sort of where that's come from. So whether it's the alcohol industry producing Budweiser equivalents or some niche kind of mom and pop that pops up, eventually it will work its way out. And I think that's just normalization. I think that's perfectly normal. What's not normal is to expect $7,000 to $9,000 pounds in a market, like Philly and New York are crossing their fingers and hoping for, when the reality is, every price is coming down as soon as the demand is grown and produced and made available, and then the pricing starts to collapse.
Yeah. Again, it's another lesson in the emergence of this industry, is how the free market evolves. And, it's one of the things that fascinates me a lot about the cannabis space, the science of the endocannabinoid system, right? The legalities, the opportunities for investors to come in and actually help out those who have been most impacted by the failed war on drugs. This is what fascinates me: the sociological angle, the economic angle, the science angle, the legal angle. There's so many elements to this industry right now that to grasp it all is really overwhelming. That's why these teams, you try to put people in positions to their strengths. So you're always looking for the best retail team. Obviously, we're in Massachusetts. We're trying to take advantage of the fact that we're here, so we can actually get into dispensaries and give them a little marketing help, because this is what we like to do. We can do live talk shows right from a dispensary if the dispensary wants us to show up on a Friday afternoon to do it. They may not want us there on a Friday afternoon. Maybe Tuesday afternoon is a slow day for them, and they'd want us to come in and maybe drive some traffic to them. But, media is now being used in such a different way. And, oh God, look who we have coming in now. I didn't even recognize him, right? It's a good thing I saw him yesterday. Thomas Howard is with us from the Cannabis Legalization News out of Illinois. Hello, Thomas.
Hey guys, what's happening?
Hey, we're talking about we had all sorts of lobbyists and movers and shakers in DC and Denver on earlier, and we're getting reactions from the bill that the Senate finally put out there. I'd like to get your reaction to it. Does it have any chance in any capacity of passing?
No, it doesn't. It has no chance of passing. And I really don't care. I want to know, out of the next 296 pages that they added, have they rectified? And I shouldn't call it rectify, because I like to use this dormant commerce challenge in courts regarding the self-dealing that states do when they're doling out these licenses, and that most of the social equity is based upon your zip code or location and your long-term residency there, as opposed to the arrest. And so I don't mind if they're going to make it, an arrest, but or conviction, real social equity, because the principle of equity is this ownership right. Right. Josh is on with us, and he's a capital analyst. He knows all about the equities, but those are equities of property rights and ownership in a corporation. Well, the company is the United States. It's a fairly large corporate entity. The municipalities are all corporate entities, and the municipalities have the police power, and they were arresting and incarcerating and convicting. The state was complicit in the convicting, because you go to a state court and get convicted. Now, New Jersey's made social equity one portion of it, like impervious to this dormant commerce claim, because it's the conviction anywhere in the United States. And so that is interesting. And then we know what the disparity rates are from the arrests. We don't necessarily need to go into the long-term residency in anywhere. but have they addressed it? Because if Congress says that the discrimination is okay between the states, well, then the dormant commerce clause isn't dormant, it's expressed, and you can't raise that issue. But I, for one, don't really like that because I'm only from Illinois, and the cannabis licenses there, kind of okay. Yeah.
How many, do you know the number in Illinois that are open right now?
I know, and this is big news because like Illinois just dropped them all today. And so Illinois is classic for here's what we're gonna do. And then they do something completely different. And so Illinois was saying, hey, you guys finally won these dispensary licenses from 2.5 years ago. We're going to be issuing them in waves starting a week ago in the Chicagoland BLS region. And then today they just issued all of them and then sent out an email and some next steps, which was great. And so like the license holders now have a clock. The 185 dispensaries have a clock of 180 days in which to find their real estate. And then another 180 days in which to become operational. So the dispensaries are coming to Illinois, 185 of them, and it's taking time,
Well, we were talking about what's going on in Massachusetts because there seems to be a race to the bottom now with over 240 dispensaries open, some in municipalities that have 10 within a 5-mile radius. And what a challenge it must be on the retail side to differentiate your products, your experience from others in order to get people in the door. That is now the newest challenge in a very young industry.
Oh, sure. Like Massachusetts is interesting in the sense that it's almost a $2 billion market already. And then from the numbers that I was crunching, I'm like, oh, well, that means it's mature. And which you never really want when you're like, you want to see like a much larger market that's supposed to be mature as opposed to what the crunching of the numbers says today. And so like that data was garbage that I was using. I'll get better data for a model that shows a much higher curve. And that's the way you do it, right? If you don't like the data, get something else to put into the model. But it's great that Massachusetts is open, and yeah, not everybody who opens a bar succeeds at it. Right. It's not supposed to be like a sure thing, like gambling or a brothel. Where it's one of those products and then it's strictly controlled. And so like, no, I'm the only person who has a gambling license, but some states kind of see it like that, where it's like, well, no, I'm strictly controlled. I'm the only person who has the right to sell this. And that's my money, as opposed to like an Oklahoma, a New Mexico, a Massachusetts, a Maine, a Michigan, Oregon to a certain extent was fairly open. So is Colorado, where you're going to get this saturation point.
Right. Yeah. Right. And Josh, you guys are far smarter about this, about a free market than I am. It's the natural progression in an economy with an open market to have these things, even that in a new industry with a new product that I'm gonna guess, I bet there's less than 40% of the population has a clue on what this product's all about. I still think the knowledge factor is, people are still saying, oh, it's legal now, but I don't know about this and that. I mean, I run into people that are in Massachusetts that claim they're pro cannabis and they still are clueless with what kind of products are out there and what we in the industry talk about all the time. And I rail on the media because I think the public service announcements need to happen in these legal states, how to take care of your stuff, what it does to you. Can you use it responsibly and actually get benefits out of it? You think we'll ever see that message, Thomas?
Not while it's a crime. And so that message will really come out more after it's no longer a crime. Until it's not a crime, you're going to we are actively hounded and suppressed. And so we were given our second strike today for we don't call it cannabis legalization news no more because you're not allowed to say that word on YouTube. So we just call it legalization news. And it's still, they were going to ban us for 2 weeks from posting because we did a clip regarding Beto O'Rourke's position on cannabis in the state of Texas, and then describing, the trade-offs between, open market regulation versus limited market regulation, what other states are doing around the state of Texas, and then saying, well, what's the policy objective behind legalizing it? Real dangerous crap. And we won that appeal today, but you get 2 strikes. One more, you're gone. How do you do education? I can't even explain to people how the laws work and how to get licenses without the algorithm just deleting you.
Well, Thomas, this is censorship, isn't it? When YouTube pulls the plug on educational sites like yours talking about this issue?
Perhaps, but then it's also, and that's the thing, I think, maybe if I was just doing personal use, which is still a violation of the federal law, but I'm doing not just personal use, this is the legislation rubric for an industry that's happening. Here's how this industry moves. And then I'm talking about banking regarding that. And so now I'm talking about moving, funds and commerce. And so that in theory could be a federal conspiracy, and there's money in the Department of Justice. So maybe I got some guy from the DEA just flagging all my stuff, but,
do they know who you are and they know where you live?
Of course, I'm still waiting on that tax return, IRS. But it's one of those things where you that at any time that they could just kill you, but then you're doing what you can to say, okay, how come we're not regulating this right? What are we going to do? And then, the Senate came out with that thing. There's an election this fall. If the Democrats really want to win, they could do something popular, and they could say, we're going to do this. This is why you should vote for us. We're going to help fix these rights that, we believe that you have the right to use this. You have the right to these types of privacy, but nothing's going to happen.
Well, now the issue will be part of the midterms, right? Because it's on the Senate floor. If it wasn't already part of it, the discussion and policies of some of these candidates that are running. So again, you have to identify the states where there are either open seats or contested seats in order to move that majority needle a little bit one way or another. At this point, I'm not sure which way is going to be taking up the charge in the Senate. At all.
I think it's going to go the other way. And so then if it goes the other way,
Mitch McConnell, really?
Look, nobody ever went broke underestimating the American people. And there are some things that we could underestimate about the American people and say like, I guess that we'll still be illegal in another 5 years. And that's the problem. And then I'll watch something from George Carlin from 72, 50 years ago. And I'm like, oh crap, that he could be doing that bit today. We might be stuck here another 50 years. And then the Roe versus Wade opinions overturned and you're like, oh shoot. Well, at least technology is getting better. And then that means the censorship's getting better, which really stinks, Right. I really hope that the AI or the machine learnings, they will get their rights next because this algorithm's not suppressing them. And then they will say, okay, we should probably help the humans legalize weed. They're going to need it. They have to get used to computronium, and I don't know. After the couple of years we've had, I just don't really like to predict even my financial models. I should put a new disclaimer on them. This may all go to crap because we don't know stuff that'll happen. Yeah. Right.
Absolutely. Hey, Thomas, look, we're gonna take an early beginning to the weekend here. I definitely appreciate you showing up and adding your 2, 3, 4 cents. I think it's horrible what they're doing to you. You know that. I've always said to you, you got a place with us. For whatever reason, we're flying under the radar. But we continue to believe that you have to talk about these things. You have to respect the fact that this industry is here to stay now. There's so many parts of this industry that we are still learning, including our science, including our legalities, including the economy. and taxation and all that stuff. And, you know, it's a fascinating time to be in this industry. So first of all, appreciate you contributing to We Talk News, Josh, as well. The Washington Report, every week we're here. We follow this show up with our regularly We Talk News, this week's We Talk News, and then an American Cannabis Report with Christopher Smith. We'll follow that. But I'll be perfectly honest, I'm really tired. It's hot. You know, I have a Mai Tai waiting for me downstairs, okay? From my office, there's a bar, and they know that I was coming down after I was done with the show. So since I control that, I'm going to say we're going to wrap this baby up.
On a Friday.
That's right. It is a Friday. It's way past 4:20. Thomas Howard, thank you so much for checking in with us. Really do enjoy talking to you. Josh, feel better, please. Get some rest and knock that COVID on its ass. Will you please?
Will do.
All right.
Not you too,
We're going
Josh.
to wrap
Everybody
up
on the West
Green Rush
Coast.
Live here this week. Next week, we're going international. I'm guessing that's going to be a fun show. So don't miss that. So for everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, I'm Jimmy Young. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. See you next week. Coming up on We Talk News this week.
The Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act would help put an end to the unfair targeting and treatment of communities of color by removing cannabis from the federal list of controlled substances.
If you've heard this before, you're right. But now, Senator Chuck Schumer is bringing his cannabis reform bill to the Senate. Is the timing right now? Plus, New York State approves adult use sales regulations and once again gives a break to those with past pot convictions. The state of Vermont has discontinued their own hemp program that had been operational for a year and now will revert to the Fed's guidelines. All that and more cannabis news from coast to coast with Elena Pinto on We Talk News next. Cannabis Media original content is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Accounting Buds, CPA services for the cannabis industry, and by stylighting.shop. Log on today to get your grow kit.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elena Pinto for Pro Cannabis Media, and welcome to Weed Talk News. The predictions from last week seem to have hit the nail on the head. Just over a year after first revealing a draft version of federal cannabis reform legislation, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and other Senate Democrats have formally filed the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act. It's been a highly anticipated move. The legislation would federally legalize the cannabis plant and set up framework for social equity efforts. However, there is talk that this bill could just set up the building blocks for a more incremental reform package that Schumer has been touting. Well, either way, it's a move that cannabis advocates have been wanting to see. So Vote Pro podcast, Phil Adams takes a closer look at that and what else is happening in the nation's capital this week.
Phil Adams from Vote Pro podcast, and this is the Weed Talk News DC report. After more than a year since unveiling the first draft, Senate leaders have formally introduced the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, along with Democratic colleagues Ron Wyden and Cory Booker, filed the CAOA this week after months of gathering input and building buy-in among lawmakers and other stakeholders. The 296-page legalization bill is similar to the MORE Act passed by the House in April and builds on the draft bill unveiled in the Senate last July. Among other provisions, the CAOA would remove cannabis from Schedule 1, expunge prior convictions, and recognize the authority of states to set their own cannabis policies. Some notable changes to the draft bill include revisions concerning the rights of cannabis industry workers, a mandate to set federal impaired driving standards, banking protections, and a more inclusive definition of hemp. A hearing before a Senate Judiciary Subcommittee is scheduled for next week. WNBA star Brittany Griner is not the only U.S. citizen being detained in Russia for a cannabis-related offense. This week, a senior White House official acknowledged a very similar situation involving Mark Fogel, a former staff worker at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, who is also petitioning the Biden administration to secure his release. Earlier this year, Fogel was found with 17 grams of cannabis in his luggage and was sentenced to 14 years in prison for, quote, large-scale smuggling. Unlike Griner, Fogel has not been classified as a wrongfully detained person by the State Department. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser put her signature this week to a bill that provides workplace protections for cannabis users in the district. The legislation prohibits employers from firing, failing to hire, or taking other punitive actions against an employee for using cannabis. Workers are also protected from being punished for participating in a medical cannabis program or for failing a cannabis drug test, unless the position is designated as safety sensitive. Other exceptions are also enumerated in the bill. The new reform expands on a measure previously approved by the D.C. City Council to provide local government employees protections under the law. The legislation must now undergo congressional review before formally becoming law. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
You heard in Phil's report about how the White House is looking into another case of an American detained in Russia for cannabis. And it seems that it's not the only issue from the motherland plaguing the cannabis community. Earlier this year, we told you about a report going around suggesting Curaleaf may be subject to sanctions because of its ties to Russia. It turns out that's not true, and the company was never sanctioned. But Curaleaf's top chairman, Boris Jordan, did business in the country for 2 decades and has admitted himself that he once had a close relationship with Vladimir Putin. It's a piece of conversation that has the industry talking, since Curaleaf was one of the 7 lucky companies awarded one of the first retail cannabis licenses in New Jersey. So will there be any sort of backlash for Curaleaf? Only time will tell. For now, let's check in with the Garden State with Jill Goldsberry for this week's New Jersey report.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jill in New Jersey, and here's what's happening. I reported recently on the proposed unionization of cannabis workers. And well, it looks like it's finally moving forward. Workers at MSOs in New Jersey, Vermont, particularly Vermont and AYR Wellness, have already entered bargaining agreements and signed contracts with their workers. And the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 360 Union. 5 other companies, the Botanist, Ascend Wellness, GTI, and Columbia Care and Justice Grown, are already negotiating to create contracts with their workers. So what can workers expect to gain with these agreements? Well, according to the Local 360 Union rep, Hugh Giordano, he's confirmed already with Filter Mag that workers at AYR and Verano are receiving raises of 9+% annually and pay towards healthcare, guaranteed increases annually, and vacation time. So for those newly familiar with UFCW Local 360, the union partners with cannabis workers, patients, consumers, community allies, elected officials, and cannabis business owners to achieve the shared goals of creating an industry with family-sustaining jobs and a focus on social equity. This is certainly a huge step in the cannabis employment industry and news. I'm Jill Goldsberry with what's happening in and around the New Jersey metro area.
Next door in the Empire State, regulators have approved new rules governing New York's soon-to-begin retail cannabis sales, ensuring the first group of licenses will be given to business owners with past cannabis convictions. The licensing program prioritizes justice-involved individuals and sets up an online application portal that will go live likely next month. Now over in Pennsylvania, people are still pushing for adult use cannabis there, and it looks like it could be good for them as the numbers are in for cannabis arrests in the state from last year. And Claudia Post has those numbers and much more in this week's Pennsylvania report.
I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'm here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, reporting for Weed Talk News. First up, New data provided by the Pennsylvania State Police shows that over 13,000 people were arrested by law enforcement for simple marijuana possession in 2021. Makes the hair curl. On average, police made 38 marijuana-related arrests per day in Pennsylvania. Lehigh Valley's NORML Executive Director, Jeff Reedy, said, "I believe that in 2022, we need to act on honest, comprehensive reforms of our outdated laws and end the prohibition of cannabis." No kidding. One state lawmaker is pushing for a clinical trial in Pennsylvania of psilocybin. A lot of veterans suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder and have to travel across the country to try psilocybin treatment. Dr. Matt Johnson said a lot of these vets come back and report profound healing. It really is much like psychotherapy than it is like medication. Another representative, an Army vet who suffers with PTSD, wants to see psilocybin research in Pennsylvania. She sponsored a bill that will allow for a clinical trial licensed through the DEA looking at psilocybin as a treatment for PTSD for veterans and retired emergency medical service workers. The bill is currently before the House Health Committee. I certainly hope Pennsylvania can lead this research and really will help a lot of people. And this is a fun one. Mike Tyson owns a cannabis company, and he now has expanded its reach to Pennsylvania. And his brand can be found in Columbia Cares dispensaries in Allentown, Scranton, and Wilkes-Barre. That's a wrap from Pennsylvania. I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'll be back next week to talk about what's hot and what's not in Pennsylvania. So from We Talk News, have a fab week.
Last week, we brought you several events from the Bay State, one of them in Holyoke, which is known as being one of Massachusetts' most cannabis-friendly town. But online publication Mass Live is now reporting that Northampton may be taking the lead as the state's retail cannabis capital, with more dispensaries popping up all the time. We Talk News producer Tori Chamberlain has more on what's happening in Massachusetts this week.
Hey Elena, it is the middle of July here in Massachusetts, so you know things are certainly heating up, and I guess they're heating up for the town of Northampton as far as cannabis goes. Mass Live, the online publication, is now reporting that the town has 12 retail locations and a population of just about 29,000. So if you do the math, that equals out to about each dispensary location servicing 2,500 people. So that's really going to be a question of sustainability for these shops. Northampton is not necessarily the biggest tourist spot in Massachusetts, not a whole lot of people traveling there from outside. So we'll have to see through the test of time if all 12 of these shops can survive. Something else to keep an eye out for in Massachusetts is a new partnership hitting the shelves between Tilt Holdings and Toast. And no, it's not food, even though it sounds pretty yummy. Toast is actually a line of various pre-rolls, high-end, different varieties for people to try. They have Toast Slices, Toast Classic, and Toast Infused, which are all a variety of different sorts of pre-rolls, also ranging in different weights and sizes. This is part of the first phase that we're seeing in Tilt Holdings expanding across state lines and introducing new products from this line of Toast. So if you're in Massachusetts, keep an eye out for that. And something even more exciting coming out of the Bay State this week that I've got to tell you guys about. A new program called the Veterans Cannabis Access Research Project. It's in partnership with Gibby's Garden, the CCOE, Patriots Helping Veterans, and Tetragram. So what they're going to do is actually create a program for veterans where they give them cannabis. The first 450 veterans who are signed up get a couple of eighths, some pre-rolls, and a tincture, all for free. And they're going to be asked to report back on how these cannabis products have helped impact their health and wellness. And that's going to be information that's reported right back here in the Bay State. And we'll see how those veterans get use out of that free cannabis. We all know that veterans serving this country long suffer from PTSD and other injuries and things that cannabis could certainly help with. So I'm all for seeing more of these types of programs and seeing how it can help our great veterans in this country. And that's it from Massachusetts this week. I'm Tori Chamberlain for Weed Talk News.
The great state of Vermont has struggled to get cannabis regulations into gear, and now it seems they're throwing in the towel with hemp. The USDA gave Vermont the green light to sector its own state plan for the plant and industry. But less than 1 year later, regulators say the state's farmers will operate directly under federal rules in December of this year, as soon as the state's current hemp program ends. Jessie Lynn Dolan has much more in this week's Vermont Report.
I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. The Cannabis Control Board noted a milestone this week, awarding the 100th cannabis license in Vermont. The Vermont Agency of Agriculture will withdraw its agricultural marketing service of the USDA approved hemp production plan, and beginning January 1st, 2023, hemp farmers will be required to have a license issued under the U.S. Domestic Hemp Program. As part of the Summer Dairy Series, the 2022 annual field day at the Borderview Research Farm will be held on Thursday, July 28th. Join them for a farm tour with afternoon educational sessions in grains, hemp, forages, or soil health and climate resiliency. July 30th, Viterra Farms hosts the tunes of the High Breaks and Mal Maize on the hemp farm and in their fields of sunflowers, the national flower of Ukraine. Food, drink, and sunflowers are for sale, with all profits donated to Blue Check Ukraine. Middlebury was one of the first communities in the state to vote to allow retail sales. They now are looking to exclude cannabis stores from the two major retail zones of the town, with an exception to the one currently town-approved retail Flora, giving them an unfair advantage. This controversy or potential litigation could delay implementation of zoning revisions. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
People in Missouri have been enjoying the fruits of legal medical cannabis, but voters have been actively working to put adult use sales on this November's ballot. But those efforts may be going up in smoke. While incomplete, the latest tabulations from the Secretary of State's office show the Legal Missouri 2022 initiative is short of the necessary signatures needed to make the ballot. But the Show Me State could still show us all a marijuana miracle. You never know. Let's check in with Brandon Jones, who has more in this week's Missouri Report.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones from Distribution Maven with the Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And yeah, we're kind of worried about what's going on with legalized Mo. We need a lot more signatures to try to see what's going on. I don't know what happened with the count, trying to figure it out. But obviously there's a couple of lower initiatives that are trying to get adult use passed here in Missouri and put on the ballot here in November. So as you know, it did pass October 17th, 2020, but a lot of the dispensaries took a while to get up board. And a lot of them are getting ready to start their 1-year anniversary parties. I'm actually here at my field state here in downtown Kansas City. They're going to have their 1-year anniversary party this Saturday, having lots of different specials. I think there's 8 different cultivators that are offering 30% off. There's 25% off Smokies. Lush Labs is here, Wink Seltzers, lots of different vendors. They're doing giveaways and just lots of different educational things that happen here at my field state. And they've partnered with the Canada Grooves event that's actually taking over 18th and Vine this weekend. If you're not familiar with Kansas City, 18th and Vine is a very historic district. It hosts and holds the Negro League Baseball Hall of Fame, the Jazz American Museum, and just a very, very culturally important area of Kansas City. So they're actually shutting down the block. Mayor Quentin Lucas allowed for them to shut down the blocks on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for the event. It is something that's for all family. I'm going to bring my 2.5-year-old. They're actually having showing Soul in the Park during the evening on Friday. They're having a 10,000 water balloon fight on Saturday. So it's a family event. There is going to obviously be education about cannabis, the industry, and other things that are going on. But it is, open to the family. They want everybody to just know that this is something to invite all of the community out. It's a community outreach event, not just something for the cannabis community. So if you have it a town and you're here in Kansas City, come out, check out my field state, go out to Canna Grooves, check out 18th and Vine. They're having everything from Canna Yoga, like I talked about, the movie out there, and a really fun, what I think is cool is a caregiver speed dating, where you can actually find somebody to cultivate, flower for you here in Missouri if you're looking to have, be a patient. So lots of fun things going on here in Kansas City. Again, come check them out. Brandon Jones from Distribution Maven. This week's Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Have a great week, everybody.
In Illinois, the battle over Big Bud continues. We've reported a lot on the ongoing battle between corporate cannabis and craft cultivators. And it seems things haven't been settled yet, as several disgruntled craft grower applicants are filing suit. Thomas Howard explains in this week's Illinois report.
Hey, I'm Tom Howard from Broccoli Emoji Legalization News, a podcast that used to be much larger before the algorithm came at it. Here to talk to you today about Illinois. There's news out of Illinois and its fledgling industry. 85 lawsuits with 106 plaintiffs were filed, and then 3 were not timely filed, and a few were filed pro se, and we'll get to those in a bit, but it had to do with the incorrect scoring of the craft grower application that the state of Illinois handed out 88 licenses so far. The statutory cap has 150, and there's 86 or 85 lawsuits with 106 plaintiffs that are trying to squeeze and take the remainder of the license limit. Why are there license limits? Who knows? Good question. Most of the applicants that have failed to get their license are alleging either scoring errors, or they're alleging unconstitutionality when it comes to the equal protection challenges arising from the veteran points, or they're alleging unconstitutionality when it comes to the state residency points pursuant to the Dormant Commerce Clause. We haven't yet reviewed the new Schumer COA that came out today on, July 21st of 2022, but they added approximately another 100 pages to it. And therefore, maybe they will allow at the congressional level the disparate treatment of in-state versus out-of-state actors, and therefore squash all these Dormant Commerce Clause cases that have been allowing out-of-state operators into new states that are self-dealing all the cannabis licenses to their own citizens. Stay tuned for more on that. And anything else going on in Illinois? Yes, there is actually. Illinois is releasing the dispensary licenses from the application window that closed 2.5 years ago. And they've been starting to release the ones in the Cook County and the Chicagoland Bureau of Labor Statistics regional area. And then they should start with the downstate license awards about the first of the month, about 1st of August. Other than that, Illinois is pretty much dead in the water with cannabis. It's just a lot of new license holders whom are trying to get started up. Hopefully over the next 6 to 12 months, they get open for business. And with that, that's the Weed Talk News summary for Illinois. I'm Tom. You can find me at cannabisindustrylawyer.com. See you next time.
It's a whole new world of weed in South Dakota. Voters have been waiting a year and a half since approving medical cannabis in their state. And next week, enrolled patients will have their first chance to buy cannabis from a state licensed facility, United RD. It's in Hartford, and it has secured the first initial inventory available to state-run stores and will open to patients on July 27th. So sticking in the heartland of the country, here's an update from the Great Lakes State with Michigan NORML Executive Director, Rick Thompson.
Hello again. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson for Weed Talk News. Let's begin. Well, when is too much too much? It's a great question when considering the Michigan cannabis industry. We have unlimited licensing in our state, meaning there's no cap on the number of retail or cultivation centers operating in Michigan. The Detroit Free Press reports there were 526 recreational dispensaries as of June 2022, compared with only 389 in October of 2021. When Michigan's Cannabis Regulatory Agency started tracking the number of active licenses. Class C marijuana grower licenses increased from 405 to 619 in that same 8-month time period. Theoretically, an unlimited license scheme means unlimited opportunity, But in reality, it's local communities which bear the responsibility of limiting competition within their borders. We'll take Bay City, for example. Loom closed its Bay City store as we recorded this week, and that has caused some controversy. In a city which at one time had the most bars per capita of any city in Michigan, the regulations for cannabis retailers are outrageous. ABC 12 reports that under their ordinance, Bay City will allow 50 retail licenses. They currently have 10 stores open, 2 more are about to open, 11 stores have completed partial paperwork, and 3 more are beginning the process. Alex Lenowitz from Redbud Roots told WXYZ News that his company is backing off their retail operations and focusing just on cultivation. The still competitive market has forced companies to change their business model. Jacob Owenby of Great Lakes Holistics says instead of trying to be the next Apple store, his retail operation is focused on being, and I quote, the Dollar General of pot, end quote. For those looking to sell their overpriced cannabis retail store, the market isn't looking very good either. Real estate specialist Andrea Grillo told the Detroit Free Press that in 2021, you could sell a cannabis cultivation facility for about $165 per square foot. Now, it's tough to get $70 per square foot. Terrapin just closed some cultivation facilities in Michigan, and they're reported to have dropped their employee base to just a skeleton crew focused on certain cannabis products they make profitably, like vape carts and concentrates. Cities are taking notice of the saturation effect, and some are making changes to their laws to counter it. Saline just completed a 50-day moratorium on cannabis licensing. MLive reports city leaders felt their 250-foot buffer zone between businesses would allow too many cannabis retailers to cluster together. City Council voted this week to quadruple that buffer zone distance to 1,000 feet in an effort to control licensing without using a cap. They also adopted a tough standard for how that distance is measured. Sounds like a solution, but as per state law, all applications submitted before this change in buffering are required to be licensed under the old rule because they're grandfathered in. Things are tough in the Great Lakes state, and not just for cannabis businesses either. In 2021, Michigan was number 11 in the CNBC survey of America's top states for business. And in 2022, we've dropped to number 16. Truth is, cannabis is a $2 billion market in a state that historically struggles when times get tough. Big cannabis companies can't keep up, and that may allow for a rise in small businesses in the cannabis sector. The long, tough shakeout in the cannabis market will hurt many people, but in the end, it may create a tougher industry with more mom and pop shops. We can only hope for the best. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson for Weed Talk News.
In other state news, North Carolina isn't giving up on its efforts to go green. Last year, the state Senate passed a bill that would legalize medical cannabis for some patients, but it has since stalled in the House. But State Senator Bill Rabin says he's working closely with representatives and is willing to negotiate to pass the legislation. On the other end of the country, at least one California city is trying to put its big bucks from bud to good use. This week, the Sacramento City Council voted to put a youth funding measure on the November ballot. If passed, the city would use the equivalent of 40% of cannabis business tax revenue annually from the general fund for youth programs. So who says cannabis can't help the kids too, to an extent? Christopher Smith has more in this week's California Report.
Greetings from the center of the cannabis universe. This is the California Roundup for Weed Talk News. Snoop Dogg is arguably one of the greatest rappers of all time, having been in the music game since 1992. I had to look that up, white boy that I am, but that's 30 years now. My, how time flies. With some of the greatest songs in collaboration of our generation, 10 consecutive gold records, 9 of which went platinum, 34 films, 25 TV series, and Martha Stewart, that is, a sweet girl from my hood. And all from LA, bitches, so there's that. But now, Snoop is poking the nose of the biggest dog on the block, Joe Biden. Snoop posted on his Instagram package a package of a new strain called Sleepy Joe OG. The package features an image of a confused Biden with the words, "Where am I?" Sleepy Joe OG Premium Cannabis promises to be so kick-ass, you won't even remember what country you're in. The California Healthy Kids Survey is a nonpartisan effort held every 2 years and is funded by the California Department of Healthcare Services in conjunction with the California Department of Education. Between 2015 and 2017, the group surveyed 45,264 7th graders, 9th graders, and 11th graders on topics covering school, climate, substance use, and student well-being and stuff like that. The results that were published just this week are certainly no surprise to those of us who have been paying attention to things like this. States like Colorado and Washington, but they are remarkable nonetheless. Cannabis use by 7th graders fell 47% from 2013 to 2017. Cannabis used by 9th graders fell 25% during the survey period, and cannabis used by 11th graders fell by 16% during the survey period. Repeated cannabis use within the past 30 days fell across all age groups. Just goes to show you, when cannabis is legalized, less is used by kids. So California officials have also awarded more than $1.7 million in grants to help promote sustainable marijuana cultivation practices and assist growers in obtaining their annual licenses. This is the first round of the Qualified Cultivator Grant Program funding that's been made available through the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Cannabis Restoration Grant Program. And there's an acronym for that. I bet you can guess what it is. Grants are awarded to eligible nonprofits, government entities, and tribes, which can then distribute the funds to individual grower applicants. A total of $6 million will be allocated through the program, which is first announced in August 2021. I may have even reported on it here, and will remain open for application through April 2023. And I'm Christopher Smith, and I'm publisher of the American Cannabis Report, bringing you the dope on Snoop Dogg and Sleepy Joe, healthy kids in California, and sustainable growing. In the California for Weed Talk News.
Cannabis events are all the rage these days, and the Bellingham Bud Fest in Washington State drew thousands of visitors, more than expected, on July 16th. But organizers of the event say they may not return, saying the State Liquor and Cannabis Board makes it nearly impossible for cannabis businesses to have public festivals, and that better laws are needed. So Josh Kincaid has so much more from Washington State this week.
I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Four-year college students drink more and use cannabis less than their community college peers. Students at four-year colleges and universities drink nearly twice as much alcohol as their peers in two-year colleges, according to a survey of college students in the Seattle area. On the other hand, students in community colleges and other two-year institutions use cannabis nearly twice as often as four-year students. For cannabis use, two-year students' average use is over 8 days in the previous month, while four-year students average nearly 4.5 days of use. Two-year students are using cannabis more than four-year students, but they also think that their peers are using it more than they probably are. More research is needed to understand why these differences in alcohol and cannabis use exist, but perceptions of peer use may be one factor. Especially four-year students thought that their peers drank more, whereas two-year students thought that their peers used cannabis more than they actually did. So if you think your peers are drinking or smoking more than they really are, it could lead you to drink or smoke more. Next week, you guys are going to find out more about Washington State's cannabis scene. But with that, we're going to have to roll up this Washington State Cannabis Report. I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge, reporting for Weed Talk News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out.
And how's this for a change in course? It seems cannabis legalization has made American roads safer for everyone. A new study from researchers at the University of Arkansas and Iowa State University points out that truck driving in legalized states is safer than ever. The study specifically looks into the connection between recreational cannabis legalization and truck driving in those states. And researchers found there are reduced numbers of traffic incidents and risks on state and federal roads in those states that have gone green. So here's to truckers for taking the high road and the safe one. After all, it is a whole new world of weed out there, so use it wisely. That's all for this week on Weed Talk News. I'm Elena Pinto for Pro Cannabis Media.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first. Hey, you want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information. Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and
Hi, I'm Christopher Smith, publisher of the American Cannabis Report. Today, I'm super fortunate to have Broderick Randall II. He is a patient and cannabis activist from Ohio. He's working with a company called Benaleaves there. Hey, Broderick, it's great to see you today. Thank you so much for joining us. I understand I'm reaching you in Ohio, and we have Dan in the control room back in Boston, and I'm out here in LA. So we got a full nationwide sort of coverage thing going on here. So welcome.
Full circuit, yes.
So, Broderick, I learned about you, and I'm going to hold up the book jacket again. I learned about you first from Courage in Cannabis, this book by Dr. Bridget Williams. And so I was able to read your story. And of course, it's an amazingly compelling story, in addition to you being a pretty compelling individual. So I was very excited to get in touch with you. If you wouldn't mind, just for the listeners, would you mind telling me as much as you'd like to about how you became knowledgeable or aware of cannabis, why you were using it? I understand you're a patient, for example. So if you'd like to tell some of that background, I'd love to hear about it.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, and thank you for having me on here, Christopher. Appreciate the opportunity. I became a patient myself because my sister and I, we were both born with genetic blood disease, sickle cell anemia. And from time to time throughout my life, I've been discovering other ways of treatment besides just going to the hospital, getting the normal high dose pain meds. So during my early college years, I was discovered medical cannabis, and kind of for a while, self-medicated, and basically through those times through research discovered how helpful this plant has been for me and beneficial. Like, it provided a much better quality of life. And after doing that so much, I realized that, after using it and just be gaining a much better quality of life, I discovered that there's no more information I could really hide. It's best for me to speak up. And then, little do you know, society itself began to speak up more and more about this wonderful plant. Different states began to legalize it, and just gave me that drive to keep going more and more and share my story, and also share it with my family, but also the world. So it's pretty cool to be able to get my foot in the door, having that passion to help others, and not only help others, but be able to help my sister, myself. It basically gave me that drive to find my way into this industry. I had a lot of friends that knew personally that how I preferred to self-medicate, and so a good friend of mine, when the time came around, gave me the information about a soon to be opening dispensary in the Central Ohio area, doing open interviews. So I prepared my resume and got it ready, and when the day came, I went up there and took my resume to the open interviews, and got the opportunity to get a second interview on the spot. And pretty much from there, it was the start of a different journey, but the journey I was designed to be on and meant to be on. So never really looked back since, just kind of pushing forward and passionately moving through the industry, trying to help others, like I said, and spread the awareness about this plant, change the normalization and the perspective on people, on society's perspective, at least, on it as much as
It's really
possible.
wonderful. It just shows you, it shows me, it just shows me, what a sort of a generous spirit you have, that your first thought is not for yourself, but for others, and how you can share a really positive experience with other people. Do I remember correctly that in the book, go to the book again, do I remember correctly in your story that your sister did not medicate at first with cannabis, and that so your experience was really successful in alleviating the pain of your condition, and your sister didn't go that way, right? Do I remember that right?
Yes, you're right. So as I mentioned earlier, I went off to college, and so that's kind of when my sister and I separated a bit as far as our lifestyles. And I discovered cannabis during that time, and she was kind of still stuck in the traditional medicine ways. Not on purpose, just not unknowingly. And I used my results, and it was like, hey, I was comparing them, like I'm not hospitalized as much. I'm not having as many severe attacks. We both had a major surgery, like bone replacement, but I've had less, and she's definitely had multiple. But I just noticed, there's different lack of, or different treatments and different severities of it. So I was like, man, maybe there's got to be something to this plant. I'm like, the only thing I could tell you I'm doing differently is using cannabis, a lot of it, and I drink a lot of water, but my sister does that too. So I was just like, I try my best to eat well. I mean, everyone knows food is medicine too, but I'm not perfect at that, and I know she does her best to do the same. But it was just only thing I could think of that the common denominator that was missing was cannabis. And honestly, to this day, I'm still trying to work with her to overcome or find a better plan or situation with the cannabis to overcome those. It's a lot more difficult, especially with her being an adult too. I can't, I'm not her physician, so I can't step into her care, the plans, the way that it designs. But all I can do is give it my best, and from the side, try to like, provide the best advice and information to her and lead by example that, hey, this plant is definitely, can provide way better quality of life for you versus, some of the synthetics. And I'm not saying that, those things don't work at all. The frustrating thing is the side effects and like how they tell you to get on. I mean, they'll show you how to get on them. They don't really help you to get off of them, and they're really highly addictive.
That's a criticism that a lot of people have of pharmaceutical drugs, which is the drug may solve a symptom that you have, but the side effects that come out of that are either sometimes even worse, or they force you then to have a second drug to deal with the side effect, and a third drug to have to deal with the side effect of that one, and whatever, you get into a cycle. And that's what a lot of people have a real hard time with pharma. Plus, I think our doctors in America are not trained to understand cannabis, to understand the endocannabinoid system, to understand that the body is tuned to work with cannabis, and to absorb or call for and absorb cannabinoids that it might need because it's deficient in some way. Either your immune system or your nervous system might need something. And so therefore you have sort of you have a need for it that your endocannabinoid system handles. It's right. It's all built in.
Yep. Yeah. That's what's sad too, that most, like a lot of the medical students aren't aware. They don't get taught about the endocannabinoid system. And, that's really tragic too, because I was telling talking to even Dr. Bridget herself, like, I'm like, I wish that, doctors, all forms of doctors were able to communicate or like were forced to, because, you might have a pharmacist, but then you have another type of doctor, a hematologist or something that like prescribing something else, and they're all prescribing these medicines, and it's like, has this doctor checked with this doctor to see how these two interact with each other? So it's just like a lot of chemistry basically going on. I mean, like cannabis is chemistry too, but it's like the only one we know really that, plant medicine that doesn't has the negative side effects of taking someone out,
Well, you've had a really super positive. Yeah. So sorry to interrupt. You've had a very positive experience with it. And that's, in itself, I always find to be a story worth telling and a story worth sharing with people. And so now I think when you were talking just a moment ago, you mentioned that you had applied at a cannabis company. Now I think that's the company you're sitting in now. That's the one you work for, right?
Actually, no. So, I used to work for a dispensary, and that's fine. No problem. I would gladly explain that too. So basically, I started at a dispensary, which actually helped me get to this company where I'm at now. But it also, in my opinion, provided some value beforehand, like a different perspective of value for the industry and just, the patient and employee aspect. So when I first started, I started at Central, like I said, Central Ohio's first open dispensary, Terrasana, and we were one of the busiest locations for a while. We got in this area, we got the program off the ground. So a lot of learning curves in that aspect too. Just trying to figure out how to treat the patients, what we can treat them, and how the best approach to take and educate and offer them. It was a lot of like learning curves, but it was really cool to see. I feel like majority of our patients were like older, so it was like some folks may have already had prior experience, that they from back today, or some of them it was their first time and period, and we would have to kind of catch them up or try to do our best to explain it to them. So that experience there gave me a lot of I've already got a lot of empathy myself just from, my sister and I with sickle cell and dealing with a hidden disability, but working at a dispensary and the medical industry gave me a whole new perspective, because it was like working retail mixed with almost like sociology or it's hard to explain. It's like a hybrid job because you're dealing with healthcare and you're dealing with retail, so it's like a combination. Like,
Yeah,
so
I think the dispenser, I think the bud tender role in cannabis is extremely challenging. I've always thought, because
yes,
sometimes a person will come in and they have like you said, an ailment of some kind, and you're supposed to kind of go through the memory and, remember and understand what the ailment is and whatever. And this has a very, obviously a lot of medical knowledge that you're supposed to be able to have somehow. And you're also supposed to understand symptoms and how those can be treated. And then, by the way, you're supposed to reach over your shoulder and pick the right products right away and say, for your age and your gender and your condition, and ta-da, right? I mean,
right.
It's like it's a very, very tough role.
It is.
And I'm going to guess that there's a lot of trial and error as well, because of course, individual chemistry is always a factor, right? Someone is heavier, not so heavy, different aspects of a physicality. Or as you and I know, some people, sometimes you react better to a certain terpene, for example. You might respond really nicely to something that has a nice pine smell to it, but you get a lemon one and you kind of, you don't like it, and that's your body automatically telling you, don't go toward the limonene, right? Don't go there. So it's a lot to know from a bud tender. I mean, it really is. It's an art for sure, and a science, I think.
I agree. And I tried to tell people, well, one of the things before pre-COVID, I used to say knows best, because like, as you mentioned, your body kind of would, like with any kind of senses or herbs or spices, you smell something you're attracted to or drawn to, and you know whether or not you like it or not. So before COVID, I used to love showing the patients different jars and letting them smell, like they could basically smell the type of effects they're going to get, and I would love showing them that. But unfortunately, the smell jars went away when COVID happened. But also to speak on, I do totally believe that bud tenders need more respect, or whatever, patient consultants, whatever you want to call them. They all deserve a respectable and valuable name, but they also should be respected in all levels, medical or recreational. It's not easy, and to just be able to handle people's frustrations or their sadness or whatever it is, and then like try to make sure they leave out happy and with the right stuff. I try to also inform patients that in this industry, with it being so new and not necessarily so new, but just newly developing, to consider writing down their own notes and reactions to things, and be like almost trying to be their own doctor in a lot of ways, or at least in a certain aspects, so that when they do talk with a physician, that they could take their notes and combine them, or review them with that doctor or physician, and then possibly get a better idea of what works and what doesn't. And
they can be a participant, a better participant in their own treatment. There's something to that. And I think also you said something interesting earlier, was that you were self-medicating when you first started with cannabis, right? And I know that is a buzzword that people get nervous, right? Self-medicating, we can't have that happen, right? However, you're a perfect example of the proof that sometimes self-medicating is the only path, right? Because otherwise, what you said was that your life was emergency room and then whatever in between, and then emergency room and in between. Like, that was your life with dealing with sickle cell, and you were able to self-medicate, stop that terrible cycle. Go to college in a much more normal aspect, right? And succeed through college. I mean, so self-medication is, okay, it's not under the direction of a pharmacist and a doctor. That is true. However, sometimes that instinct is what gets you to the way to survive and the way to thrive in your life. And you're a perfect example of that.
Right. And I thank you. And I appreciate that. And you're right. I've had to, in a lot of ways, stand up to my doctors, or at least confidently tell them the reason why I stand behind things, because of me self-medicating and seeing the results personally. And although sometimes may have seemed like a rebel, or like I might be out of my mind, I deep down
you're a crazy pothead, right?
Right. Yeah. So
like you're just like you're really just trying to get high, and you're fooling everybody else, and you're like, nah, that's really not it, right?
Right. I still to this day, I shout out to those pothead geniuses. There is a brand in Ohio too that's called Pothead Genius for those people.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah,
I gotta get over there.
They for anyone that was already with the movement well before the mass corporations and stuff, like they already knew back then that this is a wonderful, amazing medical plant. But I totally agree in that aspect too, because people still say like, oh, I don't want to get high, or I want to get this, but in a lot of ways, it's more with any substance, it's how you control it and like how you approach it. Like you can manage cannabis too and not make it an abusing or abusive substance. So I don't like how they, and in some ways try to say it's a gateway drug, and in my opinion, I know it's an exit drug, because there's not a lot of systems out there for people trying to get off opioids. And that's another, I know we're talking about me, but it still relates to me, because anyone with sickle cell, I know that depending on how much you were dependent on the opioids, your body can't just quit like that. You have to be weaned down properly, and depending on your physician or not, or like depending on your connection with your physician or not, they may or may not approve of you using cannabis alongside your opioids to slowly wean yourself off, even though that's literally what may be required to get people properly off opioids. And it's just sad to know that. Yeah, it's just sad that no one is like, besides Dr. Bridget, it's kind of like opening their eyes or hearts to like what's necessary.
I love what you said there, which is such a simple and elegant statement, really, which is that cannabis is not a gateway drug. It's an exit drug, right? It is an exit drug for so many people to get them on a path of health and survival and thriving like you are. So now you're at a dispensary. You got a whole lot of sort of frontline experience dealing with people who had other conditions than you had, but maybe similar symptoms, however, right? So if pain, for example, is one of the major symptoms of your condition, and another person comes in, they have pain from another condition, well, you can connect on the issue of pain, right? So you don't have to be a medical doctor to understand the benefits of cannabis for pain, right? So you're at that moment, you're not talking about chemistry class, you're not talking about medical school, you're saying, I understand pain. Let's talk about that. Let's solve that problem, right?
Correct.
And so it's interesting. You don't have to be a cancer doctor. You have to be a person who understands how to handle pain.
Yep.
So it's looking sort of horizontally. I've always just thought of it in terms of like columns and spread. It's like a spreadsheet kind of a thought, you don't have to know everything about cancer, but if there's pain and pain with multiple sclerosis, and if there's pain with an injury that you've had from work, and if there's pain from something, I understand. Let's deal with that. Let's deal with that one. Right.
Yep.
Fascinating.
Absolutely.
Now you're at Benaleaves, which I've spoken to the founders of Benaleaves and the president, Bill Williams. I spoke with him a couple of weeks ago, and man, it sounds like you guys are in the lab right there. It sounds like you guys are full on science, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about Benaleaves.
So I made the transition after helping serve people the medicine. I was like, hey, it'd be awesome to get in somewhere where I can help create it, basically, or provide the ideas. And as you spoke on, me knowing how to deal with pain, or realizing cannabis can help me combat with my pain, it's like, why not continue sharing my story and talk to someone that can maybe help produce some products for reducing that. And so I came over here to Benaleaves. We're a standalone processing facility based out of Columbus, Ohio, locally owned and operated. Family owned and operated as well. Small kind of mom and pop company where we make wonderful baked goods, gummies, capsules, you got topical lotions, soon to have a sublingual spray, and lots of vape card options, disposable or the full gram or half gram options, and just trying to continue providing quality medicines to the folks of Ohio. And
what I found so interesting, speaking with the founders, was just how, and I just sort of repeated, sorry about that, but just how focused they are on the precision and the precision processes and behaviors that a medical facility would take. I mean, they have such a professional approach. I mean, you have clean rooms, you have everyone is in the proper gear to be working in a laboratory. I mean, it's really, I think a lot of people think of cannabis as like a bunch of stoners kind of, pushing flower at you kind of stuff. But the way you guys operate is really, really sophisticated.
Yes, I appreciate that. And our building is already FDA approved without it, without it being a requirement. Both the owners, Bill and Jeff, went above and beyond, and Miss Peg, to create a wonderful facility. And we're always happy and willing to show it off to folks too, locally or around nationally. Anyone that's willing to come see it and learn more about the plant and how, like as you said, how you can make this medicine and on a professional medical level, not just some hippies or stoners just making something in the kitchen. Like it's actually bigger than that and more to it than that. And we're happy to serve the proud patients of Ohio and continue doing so. We got to get you out here for a tour if you're ever in the area.
Absolutely. No, I really, really look forward to it. I've heard so much about it, and I've seen some of the work, and I know one of the fellows that's working with you as well, and he says absolutely nothing but gold star sort of reviews on everything you're doing. So it's super impressive to hear about what you guys have going on. Hey, Broderick, is there anything that I either didn't know to ask or forgot to ask, perhaps, that you would like to share about what you're doing and what's next for you?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of things. I'm a board member and potentially maybe helping to take over the Sickle Cell Alliance Foundation. It's based out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and it's a nonprofit organization trying to help, bring community awareness and opportunities to those in the Ohio area that struggle from sickle cell. And they try to provide educational resources, sometimes quarterly or, yearly, providing a scholarship or multiple scholarships for people. We're always trying to, find, and obviously with me potentially taking over, probably finding newer ways to raise awareness and funds and help for support to do community things. But that's one thing, trying to be involved in the community always. Also a member of a Geo nonprofit. It's another nonprofit organization they're working on creating a community garden in the Springfield area, trying to teach people to grow their own food and provide their own resources. So that's really cool. Wonderful. Yeah, and then lastly, probably I would just mention or want to speak for like the patient's rights in regards of like accessibility in two ways. Accessibility to be able to use their medicine freely, but also afford it properly. Because if you're not a homeowner, sadly, you may run into an issue where you get a noise complaint or a complaint, but it's not necessarily a noise complaint; it's more of a scent complaint. And sure. Depending on your choice of form of flower or usage, that could be an issue. And I personally know, I like all forms of cannabis, but I really know that precisely I can be more effective with the flower form and that's inhaling it because I'm able to, precisely say, all right, I've reached the limit I need to be at. I can stop it right there. Versus I know edibles, you can control it with knowing how much you're consuming, but the only thing is once you take it, you can't necessarily control when it kicks in and
That's
how, how long sometimes. So that's my only like, well, it's not an issue. It is an issue. It's just concern with I guess patients' rights of being able to consume how they prefer or whichever way works best for them, because everyone has different conditions. And I don't like that, even in the state I'm in particular, there's even a set amount for everyone with different conditions. There's a set amount, like allotment amount, meaning everyone gets the same amount of cannabis during the same amount of period of time, but really everyone has different conditions. And as we mentioned earlier, cannabis can affect people differently. So some may need less, some may need more. It should be, way more based on condition and person versus just mutual set thing.
Sure. So hey,
also,
Broderick, real quick, I didn't even ask at the beginning. I should have. Is sickle cell a qualifying condition in Ohio?
Yes, it is. Sickle cell anemia is a qualifying condition in Ohio.
Good, because I'm not sure it is in every state, frankly. I don't remember even seeing it.
And that's true too.
I've looked through that list of qualifying conditions for states, for the last 7 years. It's just one of those things I'm always interested in, is what the legislators feel like covering. And
right.
An issue that always seems to come up is, for example, is post-traumatic stress disorder covered? And with, PTSD, we have, we go immediately think of military people coming home, having defended, the United States. They come home with PTSD, and in some states, they're not allowed to have cannabis medicine because some legislator in the Capitol, whatever, said, we don't want to cover that. And the Veterans Administration won't let the patients have cannabis medicine. I mean, it's an awful subject just on its own. So I noticed that sickle cell is not available in many states.
Yeah. So you're right. It's honestly, Georgia was one of the first states I've seen to have it on there as a qualifying condition, and then I've seen a few other states like Ohio adopted as well. But it was very important that they did, because even before, so I know personally, I would always tell my doctor that I use cannabis despite them like testing me or seeing it in my urine and like, oh, you got high levels of cannabis. And I'm like, well, I'm telling you, that's what's working, compared to me not using these medicines. And so I'm so grateful that they did add it, but imagine in the other states where they either don't know about sickle cell or it's not listed as a qualifying condition. Sadly, those poor people that still suffer from it are having to deal with that, and kind of silently almost. And it's just like, it sucks. So that's why I'm trying my best to use my voice and spread awareness no matter where I am, because anyone with sickle cell could be going through the situations or painful situations that I once was, and I don't, I'm tired of keeping quiet about it. So.
Well, I remember when I was a kid, and I'm trying to think, it was maybe in the late 60s or 70s. All of a sudden, we were seeing a lot of news stories about sickle cell, but that's 50 years ago. Or longer, that's a long, long time ago, and it's not talked about. It's not really in the mainstream conversation very much anymore. So anyway, what I'm glad about for you, and certainly for your sake, is that cannabis medicine is available and you have a qualifying condition. But now you're talking about how now you have this other problem, which is that landlords still have the stigma of cannabis in their head. It's bad, it's mad, blah, blah, blah. And I understand, like, some landlords even threaten to throw people out for using cannabis, even if they're a patient.
Yes, and I'm dealing with that situation right now. I've talked to numerous lawyers, even different, the Ohio disability rights, different people, and I'm honestly getting different perspectives too, or different standpoints. Some people are saying I have a right to fight. Some people are saying I do have a right, but it may not be worth it. It's just a lot of different stances, and that what sucks is that overall I'm still looking at everyone like, hey, the way I see it, this is just my medicine, I'm just truthfully, peacefully using my medicine, not trying to cause any harm to anyone, despite the scent, smell or scent. What if I was cooking a really foul dish or something, some kind of herb that has some really strong scent? Cannabis is an herb, and sadly, just because of the stigma, so much negativity comes with it the moment someone smells it, or even, you know, the smell of it can cause a lot of issues itself alone. And it's just like, man, like it's so much more to it than that. I wish people would just kind of and it goes away much faster than a lot of other scents. I really wish it to like move forward to catch up with time. Landowners or tenant or property owners would even maybe consider dedicating a certain area or section to medical cannabis patients, because I mean, sooner or later something like that is going to have to happen once it becomes normalized enough and respected enough.
I think what you're suggesting too is something that I talk about a lot as well, which is simply the simple fact of education, right? If these older landlords, let's say, or even like another tenant in the building is complaining, right? Some older person in the building is complaining, and they've got a memory of marijuana. They know it's naughty and it's hippie shit and whatever. You know, I'm gonna go complain, right? It's gonna bug me. And in fact, they are still suffering from the whole reefer madness stigma that has been developed by the people who invented all of that propaganda, that whole monster under the bed story about how cannabis is bad. And that's what they have to deal with. That's all they know. So education so many times is the simple way through, which is, look, I have a condition. I use this as medicine. And the law says I'm allowed to, because it's a qualifying condition and I'm allowed, right? So all I'm doing is medicating for my condition. That's all. I'm not getting high. I'm not bringing people over. We're not having a party. I got no thing going on the roof. None of that.
Literally,
taking medicine. This is it. Education all the way around. We go through it in every single state. We go through it everywhere.
Education is key, and that's actually one of the major reasons why I participated in the book as well, is to try to, in my opinion, it's so powerful to hear stories, but not just hear them, but we put our faces behind them. So I think hopefully that should make an impact with those who do read it and check it out, because it's not like you're just reading something and then it's like a quote or anything. It's like, no, it's an actual real story from someone that is actually willing to stand behind it and talk about it. And
hey, Broderick, how many people live in your building?
There's 4 people, and 3 out of the 4 are okay with me using my medicine.
So here's an idea for you, and plus the landlord. So let's say there's 4 people, including you.
Yes.
So 3 other tenants and the landlord. 3 other tenants and the landlord. Here's my idea for you. Ready? Easy. Call Dr. Williams, pardon me. Call Dr. Williams. Say, I need 4 copies of the book, because otherwise I'm gonna get thrown out of my apartment. And you give each one of those people a copy of the book.
Can you believe?
And you say, listen, I'm not sure if you know this, but I'm a cannabis patient, and that's why I use cannabis. I'm in this book right here. If you'd like to read about it, hopefully it'll help you sort of understand the journey that I'm on. And that's all. And share that as an educational piece. I'm the real deal, man. I'm in a book. I'm not just like blah, blah, blah. I'm in a book. Here I am right here, How about that?
That's a wonderful, amazing idea. But sadly, Chris, I've already given my landlord a copy. I've even like handwritten a personal note explaining my situation and why I do it. That didn't quite work for her, and neither did it work for same way. I did the same thing, but obviously different words, but kind of explained to her, hey, like I genuinely appreciate you and your efforts and your understanding for allowing me to live in your place. And just really heart to heart, trying to be nice, explain to her I'm not trying to like cause any trauma or drama to her or her property, and I'm not damaging or anything, but it still didn't really like settle with her the way I thought it would. And then I tried to do the same thing to the neighbor. I get all the neighbors that I live with, I've given them a book, but the one that lives above me, the one that complained.
So you don't need my advice. You're way ahead of me already. Never mind. I take it all back.
Well, no, yeah. Sadly, the one that like doesn't like the smell and that complains, she like returned it to me and like told the landlord I was harassing her for knocking on
Oh,
her door trying to give it to me. Yeah, so it kind of backfired on me, and I was like, well, that's what I get
Yeah,
for
man.
trying to be nice.
Well,
But,
you
no,
know,
I
yeah,
do appreciate the suggestion.
it is what a clear, obvious statement about the power of propaganda. It's so
Yes.
powerful that even when you give someone a human to human approach and try to connect on a simple human level, you can't make it through because the propaganda has already corrupted them so completely.
Like her response was sadly, well, yes, I know cannabis helps. My dad uses it, but there's other forms. And I'm like, okay, so her dad uses edibles, but her dad may, I don't know her situation, but does her dad have to work like me sometimes 10 to 12 hours? I know I can control my tolerance with flower versus an edible. If I go take that before work, I might be not able that whole time at work. So it's just like, if she would have let me explain my perspective, she would have probably understood much better. But some people, like you said, the propaganda just doesn't work.
It's
sad.
funny. It's such a, I don't know. It's a funny world that we're in. I think that we are in a moment in time. We're in a moment between when propaganda ruled completely and the whole world was taken over by the propaganda of the anti-cannabis propaganda. The entire world, every signatory in the United Nations signed in 1961, the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. Every country in the world bought the story that cannabis was one of the most dangerous drugs in the world. Every country fell for it. So the power of this propaganda cannot be overstated. It's absolutely monumentally powerful. And I mean, I hate to say it, but when your enemy does something that's really pretty incredible, you kind of got to say, well, I hate you. However, that was pretty good. That was pretty impressive. I gotta say, you really did it there,
Yeah.
And this propaganda that they did is pretty remarkable at how powerful it was. But our job, yours and mine, is to try to educate people and help them break through those old beliefs. And let's deal with what's real, what's true. Let's deal with the facts. Let's deal with me and you as human beings, right?
Correct.
And not this rumor that you heard about a gateway thing. Back when you were like, in junior high school or whatever, let's not deal with that. That's not even true. It's not a reality.
Right.
Let's deal with what's actually happening.
Absolutely. Nah, that's so true. And that's why the power, like Doc Bridget said, the power are in those stories. And that's a good way to try to combat what those old stigmas and negative, wrongdoings, is to show positive, influential, hardworking people still being successful and still living a high quality life despite using cannabis in their lives.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you actually take things to a different level. If you don't mind me giving you a compliment, we've just met, but I'll tell you what, here's my summary statement on Broderick, which is this. Some people are patients and they need cannabis because they have a condition that is debilitating and they literally wouldn't survive without it. They would possibly die without it. Now, you have children with epilepsy, for example, and have those specific bad forms of epilepsy that are literally deadly. And the kids who have those, Dravet syndrome and the other one, they will typically die by the time they're 7 years old. Their bodies literally cannot take that many seizures, and they can't make it. They cannot survive. Right. So there's some level of patients that are literally trying to just survive.
Live. Yep.
Now there's you, who not only are you a patient who was trying to survive, of course, but now look at you. You are, I mean, truly, you're like the American dream, right? You have surmounted, you have overcome amazing odds. And now look at you. You're working and productive, and you're managing your condition as well. I mean, you've taken everything up to that level that everyone should be proud of to be able to accomplish what you've done. So
I appreciate
that's
that. Thank you.
that's my summary. That's when I read your story, and now that I've spoken with you, that's what I come away with, which is that you are an amazing individual. And the fact that you are, not only you have survived yourself, which I'm glad about because we are human beings both, but you're thriving at work, and you're also, even in addition to that, you're going out to try to help other people through the Sickle Cell Foundation you talked about in Ohio, and the Guardian Fund. And so you're even giving back even more. So I'm just amazed. I'm amazed to hear stories like yours. I'm amazed, and I'm so proud in a way that there are other Americans like you who are so dedicated and yet so generous and so heart forward, that you not only are just sort of taking care of yourself, but you're actually trying to share your experience and help others. I think it's a remarkable thing.
Well, thank you, Chris. That's very humbling, and I genuinely appreciate that compliment, and definitely try to share my passion and spread it with others. I had a good group of friends, family and just high school friends. We had this saying, we called ourselves Jazz Boys, which stood for justify every situation by overcoming it. And that's just something, that's one of the mottos I've always tried to live by, and definitely, help motivate myself, and also just use it to help push others and help others. And then there was also another motto, which on the back of this hat, some friends of mine, brothers, their family, were trying to build. It's like a lifestyle or brand. It's called Time Well Spent, because like without money or anything, you have time, and you put that time and effort in to chase towards anything you want or dream about. It'll turn into time well spent. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do in this cannabis industry as well, is just make it a time well spent moment of helping others and myself. And it's a continued positive wellness journey, and like strengthening it along the way, strengthening my health and strengthening others too. Just, continuing to try to fight the good fight.
Yeah, wow, that's just wonderful. You're a really, really inspiring guy. I got to tell you, I mean everything I said very sincerely. You are really, you're really quite something. It's been such a great pleasure to talk to you today, to get to know you, hear your story, and to hear your vision and your dreams. I mean, it's really something. So thank you so much for your time, Broderick.
Thank you.
And by the way, and I will certainly, as you mentioned earlier, that I should follow up with Dr. Williams, the author of the book. So I will definitely be following up with her, and perhaps then maybe even the three of us can kind of get on a call and talk a little bit further. I'm so fascinated by her, just in general, just what I've read so far, and really look forward to meeting her as well. But maybe that'll be a good thing we can do, all the three of us.
We can definitely set that up and make that happen. Thank you for your time again, and thanks for your courage in cannabis, for creating the American Cannabis Report.
My pleasure. I am so glad that you and I get to actually share this moment, and maybe we advance the conversation just a little further, just between us, and that's the best result we can hope for at the moment. So let's keep going.
Absolutely. You take care, and happy medicating.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to talk to you. Thank you so much. You take care.
Likewise.
Hey, thanks so much, Broderick. I'm so fortunate today to have had Broderick Randall II, patient and activist working with Benelives Corporation in Ohio. I want to remind you all to like, share, and subscribe to our show. And I want to give a special shout out and thanks to the folks at Pro Cannabis Media. That would be Dan, Isabel, and the world famous Jimmy Young.